time and attention. It's election day in Salt Lake City. Is election day and are there other things going on?
Not in our county, or not in my city.
We have city council.
City councils, yeah. I guess there'll definitely be some exciting, interesting things to happen in San Juan County regarding the county commission question about whether something new should happen there. I mean, there's always the lessons for good social studies instruction on election day, even in the off year. So welcome. So I'm just going to kind of walk through the agenda. Talk about some of this is info stuff, some of this is putting our heads together stuff, and so we're gonna look at just communication and the ideas from you about the best way to kind of communicate opportunities for teachers, things like that. Just briefly. I've got somebody coming here, Marilyn Bound is coming here from the League of Women Voters to talk about some of the efforts they're trying to do to encourage more young people registering and getting excited about voting and the process. So, a little bit. I want to give you a brief update on the elementary standards update in terms of the revision and what we're looking for. And then I would love to have us kind of have a conversation about USET. How many people here go to USET every year?
Mm-hmm.
How many don't even quite know what I'm talking about when I say USET?
I go.
So it's the Utah Council on Education.
Coalition of Educational Technology or something like that.
So it's the EdTech conference. There's a big EdTech conference every year. And there's a USET newsletter, and there's a lot of tech stuff occurring. And I feel like we either join the band or watch it go on by. And I'm not saying that technology is the end-all and be-all of education. And I think like paper and like a book and looking at stuff is actually time-tested. And actually having real-life people meeting together rather than just online is also important. But there are also amazing technology resources out there. And so I want to kind of talk about whether there couldn't be some people here who are more of an affinity or people who want to know more about it could maybe have even a social studies subcommittee, just like a tech committee that might, for our February meeting, share resources and kind of what's happened out in the field. Is for some of us like me, I mean, if I were to walk in and try to use a smart board with kids, the fifth graders would laugh at me. I'd be like, what is this? Like, oh, right? So I want to talk about that. Then we're going to talk about this thing called Portrait of a Graduate. Anybody hear of that?
Yeah.
Because there's some opportunities for us, I think. And it's a part of the strategic plan state, which is why I stole the posters from upstairs, I brought them down. We're going to look at those and talk about it. You've got here. Anybody here heard the kind of the buzzword of competency-based education?
Yes.
Great. So, excellent. We're going to talk about that and see where that fits with us. Okay. Micro-credentialing. Anybody ever hear that term? Not. So we'll talk about that as well. I just want to give you a quick update on the McCarthy lecture and the essay contest, higher ed database that we've created of social studies folks. UCSS conference update and also the movie opportunity that we have. Senate Youth is coming up November 15th. Then I want to talk about possible civics legislation today and your ideas. So there's a lot of stuff where I actually want you to kind of work. It's not just like me talking, thank goodness. There are some professional learning opportunities, and I put some money aside for a budget for Better Days 2020, some Holocaust ed, and some DBQ work, and I would love to talk with you all about that. And Wendy will be here from State History to talk about the resources she's developed. Okay. Are there other pressing issues or agenda items or things that you need to talk about that we need to get out on the One thing, remind me, when we talk about the Holocaust education piece, I want to talk about, did anybody see the news story about the elementary student in Davis District that was dressed like a Nazi? Yeah. So we need to talk about how do we address Halloween policies, number one, but also how do you prevent stuff like that? There were multiple missed opportunities to intervene in the situation, and that should have been fixed. And so I'm kind of curious about what district policies are, how you address that. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Any other issues before we move on? All right, so let's say hi. I'm Robert Austin. I'm the social studies specialist here. My able assistant, Brian, is staffing he can speak for himself, but I'm mansplaining right now, apparently. But he's also staffing the folks who are online. And do we have some folks who've checked in online?
Just looking in that right now.
Yeah,
I see Amy Christensen, Ramirez, Monica Flint, and Peggy.
Great, wonderful. All right. So we want to say hi to all of those. So the meeting's being recorded. And I will send the meeting out, and I probably will send this link out possibly to my email listserv. And here's why. I've had people actually tell me they didn't know we had a meeting like this for districts. So just on the off chance that there's somebody out in a school district who is the social studies rep and they don't know it, I'll send this link as well out to the field. And either the meeting will go viral, people will be like, wow, this is amazing what happens in these social studies leadership meetings, or at least maybe we'll get some people to say, please unsubscribe me from the email list. I don't know. So let's talk a little bit about the email listserv. So I have a listserv. Okay, I've grown it over the years. It has folks on it. You guys are all on the social studies leadership list, and you're probably also on the. So you get double whammies. You get two. So before we move any further, let's make sure we do other introductions. So let's say who you are and where you're from, please.
Corey Merrill from Iron County School District.
And are you a classroom teacher, or do you have a position in the district?
They officially just made it a district position, but I'm a full-time classroom teacher, but they're going to give.
Do not spend it all in one place, all right?
Just get eaten in taxes anyway, so.
Right, yeah.
It's official, so.
Congratulations. You've earned your stripes and your stipend. All right, awesome. Thanks, Corey.
Art Hanson, Weaver School District.
And Arts, what's your role in it?
Assistant superintendent with some other assignments.
With other duties as assigned, yeah, we know that, right? Bus duty, lunch duty, right? Yeah, well, we're glad you're here. What's your background in education?
I taught 18 years in social studies and in German. Two areas, two majors. In administration now for 16.
Welcome, glad you're here.
I'm Ryan Mueller, Logan City Schools. I'm a classroom teacher, teach U.S. history. So
What grade?
8th grade.
8th grade.
Yep.
Cool. So where are you chronologically? You teach chronologically?
We do teach chronologically, yeah. So I used to teach, before this I used to teach high school in Nebraska. I taught 10 years there, history and government there. But we're in 8th grade now. We're just kind of starting to get into pre-revolutionary stuff. So.
Discovering, whoa,
Yeah.
these things called colonies.
Yeah. We've been in the colonies, right? We've been in the colonies the past few weeks in class.
I'm Amber Rauch. I am Murray City School District, and then I also work as the Murray High School instructional coach.
I'm the Nebo specialist.
You have other duties as assigned as well.
I am down to one other duty. so that's good.
Congratulations, wow, that's really good.
I run Canvas for the district.
Oh, it's just that. Yeah. Hey, Marilyn, welcome.
Hi.
Welcome. We're just rolling around and doing introductions. You can sit here and introduce yourself, and then we'll come back to you in a second.
Okay, I put on a visitor tag.
Perfect.
I'm Marilyn Bound with the League of Women Voters. And Robert has I could speak with you about 10 minutes this morning, so thank you for allowing me to be here.
Right, and you've dressed appropriately for elections.
For election day, yes,
That's great.
and for my little pitch.
Perfect. Perfect. Great.
Elaine Holbert, Alpine District Specialist.
Peter Van Orden. I taught secondary schools for 35 years, full-time, 25 years university part-time. I've been a district representative for 25 plus years for the, now am retired from the classroom, work for various groups in a consulting, various capacities. I'm kind of different groups.
Great. Thank goodness. That's great.
I am Kim Zito. I am the president of the Utah Council for the Social Studies. I am a classroom teacher, teach grade, U.S. history, and AP geography.
And we're so grateful you're able to write subplans. For anybody who has to write subplans for today, I'm like,
Making sure they're
I
on
missed your
track.
line, though. What'd you say?
I said I'm watching them online right now, making sure they're on track.
I love that. I love that. Hey, Brian, do you know, is the meeting, as far as you can tell, people are they able to see and hear?
Yeah, looking at it, it's been, yeah, it switches from person to person.
Yeah, great. The masses are also watching and checking. So we have this amazing loop here of technology. Maybe the kids are watching you right now.
That's what I'm doing. Ask me questions.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. All right, Jess.
I'm Betsy Olson with Salt Lake School District, Social Studies.
And other duties as well. So you do world languages as well, is that right?
World Language National Board Certification.
That's great.
I'm Stasha Wheeler. I'm the Social Studies Specialist for Granite School District, but I am just straight up part-time, so that's all I do.
Straight up part-time, awesome. That's great. Well, we're glad you're here. We'll try to keep your work-life balance so it's straight up part-time.
We're good. This was my allotted time for today, so.
Awesome. So, really briefly, let's talk about the email listserv. I have a listserv. Goes out. I used to have a blog. UEN doesn't support that blog post anymore. So what I did, the most recent email that I sent is just a compilation of a lot of stuff. Okay. And I intend to do that a couple times a month, just when I've kind of accumulated enough either opportunities or somebody sends cool lesson ideas or whatever, I will send that out. And my question is, does that seem, what's the best way, do you think, to communicate with your teachers? Because I don't really feel like bombarding them regularly with one event, but I'm open to ideas.
What I really liked about it, and I just straight sent it to all my teachers, is because you had headings like geography or psychology, and so the teachers were able to open it up and just kind of hone in on what was important to them.
Okay, you like that part?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I figured that would be useful for a teacher that. Any other feedback on that? Seem to work.
It was kind of like just like a monthly newsletter,
Right.
which I think once a month is not.
I mean, I used to do that before, and then I would just send people a blog, but I think people didn't necessarily always go to click that next link to go to the blog. So, all right. So yeah, look for that. If you've got things you need to, or you want to pass on, and especially, I would love to know, like, if you see or hear about some great instruction that's occurring, or student spotlight on something that that we want to celebrate, not just in your district, but across the state. I want to know. People need to see it to be it. And so if you've got a really strong We the People program, or if you've got teachers who are taking off on, and you go out and take pictures of people with the giant maps, or whatever you're doing, send it in. I mean, I can send visuals from the conference. I think sometimes people hear about the UCSS conference, but if we were to do a spreadsheet of where are teachers coming from to attend that conference, I mean, sometimes it's just like, why is there a huge swath of, I'll just pick on, like Al Blue district, which doesn't exist, as it's like, why do we get so many from there, or why don't we get any from there? What's the deal? I mean, some people are just allergic to going anywhere farther south than 33rd. We live in Salt Lake City, I mean, that's the reality. People who drive up from Iron are like, are you kidding me? So I think that that might be interesting. It may be interesting just, Kay, to just kind of pull that spreadsheet. I won't steal your thunder, but we had a great conference. So, all right, so I'll still plan on that kind of monthly event. I appreciate the feedback on the headings, and just send me info about people that we can celebrate lessons, or if you, even as a classroom teacher, if you come across a great website, or you're using technology, you're using Nearpod in a cool way, let me know. I have had some teachers who, like the one testimonial of this program that I don't even remember the program, but it was she had talked about it enough that I just cut her email. I said, hey, do you mind if I just spread the word about that program to somebody else? She was one of 10 teachers selected in the nation to go to this huge thing. It's kind of like the Madison Fellowship or whatever. I mean, a lot of times Utah teachers rise to the top in the application pool because places don't get very many Utah teachers to apply. So they want to hit their demographics. A good example is Mount Vernon. George Washington's Mount Vernon programs that they do, professional learning, are awesome and complicated, and talk about all sorts of issues around everything from leadership to enslavement, and all of those really interesting issues for kids and teachers. And they've never, or just recently, I mean, in the last couple of years, they told me that they just hardly ever either get Utah applicants, or they've never had anybody from Utah as a part of their fellows. So we want to push that, okay? All right. Well, welcome, League of Women Voters.
Thank you.
It's voting day. And a lot of us are kind of are sad because we don't get the little stickers anymore, because we send our little ballot in the middle. Welcome.
Oh, do you want me to?
No, you can be right here. You
I
can
can
just
sit.
you can sit. The camera filming you, and
Oh, dear.
I have stopped by.
Okay. Good morning. Here's another one.
great. Thanks.
I have just passed around some flyers because the League of Women Voters of Salt Lake, and I see that now that I
that's
printed
right.
this, a
It
few
makes us guess.
letters.
It's okay.
are
It's just
gone.
that the graphics are on
But-
the top of this, right?
Yeah.
Can we have a couple more this
So
way?
LWV stands for League
Nice.
of Women Voters. And what we have is a Vote 18 Democracy class lesson plan. It was a national kind of soft money project that focuses on the importance of voting. After we discussed the history of voting rights, because all of our students now were born after 18-year-olds received the right to vote in 1971, so they don't have memory of that. So we just quickly remind them of that. We have a video that John Legend produced that's kind of catchy and livelier than the rest of us look at this point. But then we do a brainstorming session with them about how they vote in their personal lives on choices they make for friendships, music, movies, etc. And then we move into the issues, local, state, federal, that concern them, and list those on the board. We do we have student volunteers do a debate or, quote, their election that day in the classroom. Then the election is, to me, focuses on the significance of voting. Because we pass out ballots of different colors and those different colors represent the fact that over 60% of Utahns are registered to vote, but only maybe 36% do. So we pass out different colored ballots, have them vote for their classmates who have just spoken with them, discussed with them these issues. And when we collect the ballots, we throw out the non-voters. So, we say now, this is the real result based on participation. And we also have we have candy bars so that the candidates can pass out gifts, to their constituents, who
So it's
will
a
you
real
vote-
life simulation, right?
Yeah, right. Who will you vote on based on what you might get from them? So we try to make it a little more realistic. This is just a 1 hour, one-time program. And in fact, we are going to East High next week. We'll be there 3 days in a row at 2 of the social studies classes. So we're covering 7 classes next week. So anyway, we'd like all of the social studies specialists, all of you who work with the teachers, you and your some of you teachers, those of you who work with teachers, to pass out the information. And maybe add a few more letters up here. Somehow, it was on the disc, but it didn't print off. So
How far are you willing to travel?
Well, eventually, I would like to see this over the state. Is that what the question is? Right now, we're focusing on Salt Lake County and kind of starting in and moving out. What did you have?
Cedar City.
Cedar City. I think we have members who do not mind spending some time in St. George, Cedar City area. So what we would do, I think, is because we do not currently have an active league in that area. We do in the Moab, Grand County, and we do up north and here. So right now we have 4 very active League of Women voters, but our St. George one is not going at this time.
What about Utah County?
Pardon?
What about Utah County?
Utah County. There has been talk of one starting there, but the leadership, we haven't had leadership step forward yet. But that's not very far.
Right.
I mean, we're metropolitan area, right? Okay. So any other questions? I didn't want to take much of your time. I just wanted to present that we're available and my name is on the bottom. And I want to thank Peter Van Orden for his years of teaching. He may have had 2 of my students at Noel. At that time it was Marilyn Noel. Yeah, thought so. Okay. So
I have one question. I tried your website and it's not working. Do you know if it's?
which one? The democracy
Democracy.com.
is not working?
It just asks me if I'd like to buy the rights to the site.
Oh, it did?
Yes.
I will check with them. I will contact them because
I
thank you.
think teachers would really like to be able maybe to kind of take a look at it and then they could have an idea of
And
where.
several years ago, they actually had an option for teachers to come in and join, and you got extra little things to pass out in your classroom because there's no problem with teachers doing it themselves.
Okay.
They don't have to, I mean, we're volunteering to come in and to bring a different faces, to your classroom. I'm a retired classroom teacher myself.
Students would
And
prefer that
so,
anyway.
that may or may not be interesting to you. You may want to do your own thing. But at that time, when I went to it, I had to register as a teacher and I had just retired, so I wasn't able to do that full program with gifts. But I think it's just down momentarily, but I will definitely check
Okay,
with
I'll
them.
keep checking it. to see.
Another website to check, but this wasn't up yesterday when I checked it. At one time, this was called rockthevote.com.
Oh, okay.
Try that one. It wasn't working for me yesterday.
Well, yeah, because we pulled up democracy.com again here as well, and it's still up for auction. I'm thinking that our little tech subcommittee, whoever wants to be on that, should buy this site because democracy.com is that's a good website.
It's a good, yeah. The Rock the Vote one is up.
Rockthevote.org.
Yeah, rockthevote.org is up.
Rockthevote.org.
That one's up.
Peter?
I can share just a quick anecdote. It might be worth relating to students sometime. In 1969, when I started college, myself, 2 other people from my college fraternity, Professor Dan Jones, many of you may know, have known Dan, started an organization called Utah Vote to encourage ratification of the amendment. And it was a student group, became the strongest advocacy group in or ratifying the vote.
Oh.
And I finally got to vote in 1972, but I was old enough by that time. But I mention that because it was a student-initiated group, and we went to high schools and involved high school students. We went to each of the colleges and had chapters there. It was called simply Utah Vote. If somebody has kept a history somewhere, it might be there. It was actually started by a gentleman who went on to become the commander of the Utah National Guard, Peter Cook. College roommates, but he's recently returned from several years in Washington, D.C.
This is a segue a bit into, we are also, we're visiting with the Binion Center and the Binion Center at the University of Utah, Thames Center at Salt Lake Community College. They have students enrolled in service learning within their courses. And so we're also asking if they would like to come and be assistants with us in the classroom so that our young people can see other young people interested in voting, and also be a way for the students to earn some service learning credit. So
Great.
we're hoping to get that going by January.
Awesome. Thanks, Marilyn.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I could leave the rest of these with you.
Okay, great.
Even though now I see they're faulty. I will
No problem.
do something about it.
It's kind of, it actually kind of works. Then we have to like fill in the blanks. It's like a, you know, it's like a close.
Oh, good point. Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you
Great.
so much.
Thank you, Marilyn.
Just
Thanks for the, and you're,
just leave this?
you are ready for your flag dance in that outfit. I mean, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Right? I love it.
Well, I don't have a dance. Unfortunately, that was in the past. I dance with it. Thank you. So nice to
Yeah, thanks,
see
Marilyn.
all of you.
Well, thank you. And I think the League, I think the League is one of those organizations that just kind of helps you be reminded of how important it is to be civically engaged, and how people out there just want to make sure we don't squander, especially with such a hard-won right for women that we're celebrating next year. So, thanks. All right, let me give you a quick update on the elementary K-6 standards revision process. So, I have just received word from the state board chair of who will serve on, from our state, on what's called the Standards Review Committee. Actually, I believe a teacher from the Salt Lake District is on. Wendy, you're on that list. And Sue is on the list. In terms of, so just so you know, we have 7 people from recommended from the State Board of Education, 5 parents recommended from the Speaker of the House, and 5 parents recommended from the President of the Senate. And that group will convene and look at the existing elementary standards and make recommendations to the board about the scope and range of any revisions that they recommend. So that's where we're at. We haven't even met yet. Just got those names a couple weeks ago. We'll then meet. I'm hoping to meet in November. It's tricky, the holidays are always tricky, but November or early December, finish up with those recommendations so that we can start in the coming year. And that's where I will want your help, because what we're going to want to do is make this process as transparent as possible, and we're going to want really good elementary teachers to be a part of the writing teams. So you need to ferret out names for me. I'll be sending you an application process, because I want to make every step of this just as open and public as possible, so people don't question any bit of it. As you know as well as I do that when you're in education, you're in politics. So there we go. But the hope is that we can bring people together and really kind of crank through Case 6 relatively quickly, so that we are back to the board, I hope, with a recommendation where we would get how things roll out would be if there's what's called a 90-day review, because there will be. if that 90-day review can happen, people can really look at the standards and think about them over the summer, then they could get approved in the fall of 2020 for implementation the following year. That's kind of how it would roll out. Okay. Cross your fingers. We'll see what happens. It's going to be a fun, interesting ride, and it'll be an opportunity to once again focus on elementary social studies. Because I have visited elementary schools over the last few weeks, and I can tell you, I don't see social studies. Even in districts that are adamant about the importance of social studies. And I spoke to curriculum directors in this very room about elementary social studies, and why would we even go down the path of writing new standards if we're not teaching it? And I got a lot of curriculum directors saying, yeah, you're right, yes. But when I go visit their districts, and I walk in and I look on the board for this day's schedule, social studies is just not there. Literally a blank black square on a bulletin board with the 4 core areas in one class, and social studies, it's just a blank square. Or if it's taught twice a week, possibly for 15 or 20 minutes. So we got our work cut out for us. And I think that the standards process will be an opportunity to have the conversation about how do you infuse your day, carve out time. Because I don't believe that there's not enough time in elementary grades. Because there's a lot of time that's wasted, I believe. That's that. Comments on, is there anything saying that is provocatively untrue?
No, I asked my grandson who's in 5th grade, what he's learning in social studies, and the only thing he can tell me is that he's memorized the states and the counties. Like, oh. So,
right.
Yeah, so I try to get what I can out of him, and I don't think it's happening in his classroom. I know it's happening in some classrooms, but not enough.
I talk to parents who have kids in grade school. I've talked to the kids. I get the same thing. They don't, first of all, know what social studies is. Don't only marginally have an idea what history is. I concur from what
I want you to think back to some of your favorite elementary social studies opportunities, because you probably had them. I mean, I remember learning about Pompeii when I was in 3rd grade. I had to make a little speech about it. I had to look at the National Geographic and talk about pumice, and it was pretty cool. And it's like you can say, well, Pompeii, whatever. You don't have to learn about Pompeii. You can learn about whatever. But the point was, by learning about Pompeii, I learned about the fact that there was this place called Italy. I learned about time. I learned about chronology. I learned about planning for disasters. I learned about, and then I also learned all these other skills about speaking and reading and writing and presenting. And it's absolutely asinine what we're doing. And we don't focus on the content of social studies, because no historian, geography, etc., doesn't read, write, speak, or listen, period. I'm not going to say it anymore. But then what I need from you is, what are we doing? What decisions are being made at your district level regarding materials? Because if people aren't buying social studies materials for teachers, if teachers don't have maps and charts and readers and programs, if it's always a literacy program and the expenditure is literacy at the expense of everything else, we're not increasing in our literacy skills at the levels that kind of expenditure would indicate. So therefore, maybe we need to try something else, which is a more holistic approach to a school day, including social studies content.
Robert,
So in my district, I feel like there's been increasing support for social studies at the elementary level from district administration. So that's been wonderful because I've been hearing more and more from principals on what kind of materials are out there for elementary because now they're interested in purchasing them. So I guess my question is, what is being done at that level from USBE to communicate that? I would imagine it's the same kind of discussion.
Right?
Because
Starting to filter.
it matters who the leadership is and what the leadership will support and advocate for.
Right. I mean, it does matter. I mean, I get support I get a lot of head shaking at curriculum directors meetings, for example, here, regarding the importance of, so I don't think anybody argues that social studies isn't important at the elementary grades. It's just that people, I think a couple things. One is, great resources that are out there, and making sure that if there's material, because elementary teachers can't be expected to create every lesson on their own, and just sit and transfer their knowledge about whatever topic to fit with a standard or fit with a current issue, or, I mean, they need help there. And so that's where I think we need to be clear about what are some resources that are available for teachers, and how do we, I mean, it's not like there isn't a lack of stuff. It's just about trying to kind of pull that together. One of the ideas that we've had is looking at curriculum guides or core guides that would tie a standard to, here's a link to this, this can help, here are lesson ideas for specifically drilling down to that standard level, and a teacher could just turn the page. They want to teach this unit on colonial America in 5th grade. Here's a bunch of stuff. Here it is, print it out. Here's an inquiry lesson for you for kids. Here's something beyond memorizing the states. What is a colony? Why are they there? So that when they come to 8th grade, they have some schema, right? The problem with creating core guides right now is that we can't do that because we're revising the standards in the elementary grades. So we can't start that process till after. But I don't know. I just feel like who do you see as the linchpins who are going to be the deciders about what kinds of, like, if I said 45 minutes of social studies instruction daily in your elementary classroom, which is one of our recommendations from the marginalization of social studies, where would the support have to come from for that to happen?
Like all motivation is coming from end-of-level tests. Because that's what teachers in curriculum in our schools tell us, is that everything that they do in their classroom is
I mean, is that what we have to do? Do we have to start advocating for, we're doing the standards and we want them to be accessible, and we want to add another assessment to elementary kids?
But I know the teachers who are successful at integrating social studies, they find a way to tie it to their ELA standards. So if that was something that we could say to teachers, here's your social studies standard, but when you teach this, here's also the English language arts standards that you're covering. I think you might have more teachers at just even a grassroots level that would say, oh, okay, now I can see how I can embed this with my English language arts, which I'm needing to do anyway.
Okay, so how do we do that? What do we need to do? Do we need to, at the state level, bring a committee of people together to kind of work through and show examples, regardless of whether the standards, we know that you're going to teach U.S. history at some point. We know that you're going to teach Utah history at some point in our standards. I can't see a major shift in our K-6 standards to throw those grade bands up. I just don't see it unless people recommend that.
Granted, they created its problem is it's outdated now, but just with as far as the resources side go of it, not necessarily the standard side of it, there was a thing that was created called interconnections, where we did it for both science and social studies and said, okay, when you're teaching this language arts standard, here would be a really good social studies standard that you can teach this reading concept with. There's a good one that you can do for writing, for science. And so it was an actual toolkit that the teachers were given so then they could see how all of the standards kind of interconnected together. So, I mean, it was literally like where we had to design the lessons, the activities, find the resources, and just kind of put it together for them.
But I remember interconnections. I mean, it was quite the district initiative. And Jan,
I know Don Hauser worked with it.
yeah, but even before her was, it doesn't matter. But I mean,
You're getting way before my time.
yeah. I've been here a long time
Yes.
talking about elementary social studies and
Yeah.
wringing my hands while we don't teach it.
Robert, this year the teachers, though, in our district, they've added PBIS that has to be implemented in the classroom, social and emotional learning. And there's this very deep insinuation that that may supersede content in whatever the subject area is, regardless. And teachers are feeling the stress to add all these other aspects to what they're already teaching. And nobody's coming in with that level of urgency for the social sciences. But I know that as a geography and AP world history teacher that social and emotional learning is more important than my content, is what my district is telling me. Nobody's coming in and telling our elementary teachers that social sciences. So they're already feeling the burden to still meet end-of-level tests in all their other subject areas, plus add all this other curriculum.
Right. Even though social emotional learning at some level has also a huge interconnection to social studies.
That might be a way to add it, where we can say, here's your aspect, your method.
Brian?
So Monica Flint from online, we have social studies materials that were adopted and purchased over 15 years ago. We want to buy social studies materials that will be used integrated with other content areas and more updated with digital content. But she's concerned about the elementary standards meshing with that. So she would prefer them being written sooner rather than later so they can get that integration rolling as well.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, the reality is that like a national, I mean, any program that's out there that's going to be at the national level is, regardless of where we are in our state standards, they're either going to align or not. So I would, first of all, think about the layout of the course grade sequence for elementary standards. I don't have a horse in the race. We'll listen to whatever the Standards Review Committee says, but I also need to know what you think. Right now, it's kind of a modified but pretty kind of spanning horizons kind of concept, right? Third grade is more about community. K1, 2, even third grade is about local community more or less, and then fourth grade it's state, and fifth grade it's nation, sixth grade it's world. That's just been the way it's been for a number of years. There's not any necessarily wrong or right way. It's not like kids can't think about the world in second grade. But that's just the way it's been laid out. And my question to you is some kind of adjustment that changes the grade sequence for that or the topics. What do you think about whether that would be disruptive, too much? You know, I don't know. I'm just kind of curious.
I don't think it can be too disruptive. Otherwise, if it isn't, they don't pay attention. But I would love to see us move more towards the C3 framework. I realize we'll never get there, but more in that direction would be better.
So when you talk about the C3 framework, you're specifically talking about the inquiry arc. I mean, this idea about inquiry, and that's the inquiry, and that skill set is really devoid. It doesn't matter. I mean, the content, you can plug in whatever content is there, right? I agree. I mean, I think that I hope that the writers and whomever comes together is going to look at inquiry, and historical and geographical questions and economic questions is the problem solving that third and fourth and fifth graders can do. But I guess my question is, if I said, if the writers or the Standards Review Committee comes back and says, we want to break this up, fourth grade needs to be taught in fifth grade because that's, I mean, what's that going to look like in your bailiwick, in your world? If suddenly fifth grade teachers are not teaching U.S. history anymore, well, America's...
They'll be fine. They don't teach it anyway, right?
They don't teach it anyway.
how nice it would be for sixth grade teachers to have Utah Studies and then have it again in seventh grade, so that there's not that like 2-year hiatus where they don't remember the small amount that they were taught in fourth grade.
Yes, and the 8th grade US history teacher would love it if the 6th grade teacher taught US history, because then they could teach it again. They'd remember it. I mean,
Yeah, or
part of the other issue there is if kids aren't remembering what you were teaching them, then you weren't teaching it very well. Sorry. You know, if it's not memorable,
you remember the songs.
remember the songs, you know, remember the field trips. You do remember when you had to stand up in front of people and talk about Pompeii, clearly. You remember. So what is it that we can create? I mean, what I'm looking at is elementary standards that are manageable for teachers, but that really ask a lot of kids. That's what we want.
You can create materials supported after we have standards built.
Right. Okay.
It requires a lot of time and effort, and it's something that I found that teachers really have writing time and effort. It can be created at reasonable cost that you could say, if the state's willing to say, hey, here's some sources and materials, but there's some political issues there.
No, I think we're gonna, and we'll just have to get that commitment. I can't imagine that people wouldn't commit, especially if you're in the districts are saying, we need this.
Well, we don't buy texts for social studies in our district at secondary level. Science either. So teachers who say, hey, we have a new set of standards, say, well, what do we teach this? And the district response will be 10 years to teach it. But if we could provide them something, and I think we may see a shift in the teachers to say, okay, this is doable and great value, and you've made it easy enough that I can do it.
All right, well, we're all in this together, so buckle up. All right, I got an email from USET. How many people get anything from USET? Okay, right. I'm not going to pull it up because I don't want to pull it off the PowerPoint, but there were like a gazillion tech resources that this email was referencing. Everything from the Adobe Creative Cloud that I talked about at the last social studies meeting, online courses on making documentary films, to the Big History Project, which is an OER amazing resource regarding history instruction that OER, Open Educational Resources, free, available for teachers. They're actually working on a world history course as well, specifically world history. We looked at using a lot of their materials in our online world history course. Just to, again, it's about inquiry and about wondering about big questions. So there's a lot of tech stuff out there that we need to be more aware of as social studies folks. And I'm curious about whether there are people here who are like, oh, I'd like to dig into that a little bit and just share out for our February meeting about some of the most promising, quick, easy resources that teachers might find useful or that we are using. So we kind of like a little tech subcommittee. Is there anybody here interested?
I can do that.
Okay, so Corey is interested.
Corey and I already work together, so efforts.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys are, especially that OER project, I mean, there might be some really cool stuff available there. Anybody else interested? A subcommittee of 2 is fine. We can certainly get other volunteers from the line. Anybody else just like, no, that might, I know you're busy, so once, twice. Yay, we have a subcommittee, yay, because anything over 1 is a subcommittee. So that's awesome. Thank you, guys.
We'll plan to set as well to do it.
That'd be awesome. That'd be great. And then the one thing you could do is let people know when the USET conference is.
March.
It's,
Yeah,
I have it
usually
on
the
my
first part of
calendar.
March.
because it would be good to get more of a social studies presence.
It's back in Utah County again this year. Said the Utah County lady.
Conference Center versus University of Utah, getting there.
Now, I talked to Pam Sue, who couldn't be here today because she's in a principal's meeting. So Pam is the Jordan School District social studies person. She said that one of the social studies meetings that we have scheduled is during the spring break for her, or
Same.
is that the April? Is it
It's April.
April?
The
So we'll reschedule that. So Brian, if you can make a note, we'll send you out info. So February 11th is the next social studies meeting, and then we'll have one more in April, but we'll find a better date. Okay, so Brian and I will work on that.
I have another comment
Yeah.
as well. Sorry. From Axel Ramirez. The problem that I see for my elementary teachers coming out of college is that they understand the natural integration of English language arts and social studies. But when they're required to teach from the basal reader, the limited social studies content in the basals does not match up with the Utah core progression. There are ways to work with this, but if a new teacher has to choose between teaching the social studies core or teaching the social studies in the basal reader, in order that it shows up in the basal, and this is just a snapshot event of a person, they will choose the basal reader sequence and content and ignore the core. Once they ignore the core for a year, we've lost them until they get re-energized by social studies through some other method. I suggest some kind of meeting of the minds about how to help teachers navigate the basal requirements and still teach the core.
Hey, all right, meeting of the minds.
So do most of the schools use the basal?
It depends. I mean, if you're talking about like a program like Journeys or Wonders, or a lot of districts do. Do you guys know in your districts what?
Wonders.
Because maybe when they're doing the or rewrite, they can look into that and see what.
Yeah, but they're not the same.
Not the same.
No, the districts don't all use the same reader.
So there's no consistency there. Then you've got the layer of, as soon as we change standards here, then that basal changes, and they pull out the story about George Washington Carver and put in the story about George Washington. We're having side by side. There's this other larger concept about disciplinary literacy and what are the specific skills that historians and geographers and economists do that are different than just a literacy ELA classroom. But honestly, if students were getting content and being taught ELA skills to start with, that would be great. Okay, so I want you to look at this thing. We've got the posters down here. This is called Portrait of a Graduate. Okay, you've got a hard copy. For those of you online, you're gonna have to just Google Portrait of a Graduate Utah, and you'll find this document. It's on our webpage. It's a part of our strategic plan. And I want you to spend some time with this for a second. And here's what I'd like you to think about. This is getting a lot of interest around the country, but specifically, what I like about this is a concept that says, even if you're teaching first graders, you're thinking about them as graduates. Okay? What are you doing when you're teaching kindergartners? What's the skill set you're developing with them? I want to develop it, and what I want us to think about is, where are the natural social studies connections? And I'd like you to just look at this for a moment and jot on it or think about that, because what I'd like to do is create a really simple infographic as well. This is an infographic, right? That shows the portrait of a graduate and how social studies fits, right? So I want you to look at this and think about, oh, that's a social studies thing, okay? So if you look at here, the first thing is that the vision. I want you to look first. Let's see on this side where it says our vision. Even though it's kind of the back, the vision of Utah, right? The vision statement. Upon completion, all Utah students are prepared to succeed and lead. We just stopped there. Is there anything there that says social studies?
All Utah students.
So all Utah students, so you're talking about inclusion for one. You're talking about all kids, okay? So we're talking about equity. What else?
Leadership is usually
Leadership is a huge social studies skill in terms of what are leadership what are the leadership attributes that led Cesar Chavez to do what he did, to have George Washington do what he did, to have Elizabeth Cady Stanton do what she did, right? Just there in this vision, you've got social studies concepts. And the knowledge and skills to learn. And then look at these next two words: engage civically and lead meaningful lives. How dare we say we want kids to engage civically and then not teach elementary social studies? Right? Then what is this? A bunch of, So what I want you to do then is I want you to please take a look at it. You can work with people, you can talk, but just dig into this document for a bit and just find where you think, oh, that's a social studies concept, and just either make a note or put an SS, and then what I want us to kind of talk about is what are the biggest themes? What are the most of the, because there's like 14 indicators. There's a bunch of indicators here. What are the ones that are really like, bang? Okay, does this make sense? Because we're going to make a document, from this that says we're taking this seriously. Here's how, because this is a state board document. This is getting out more and more in the field, and I want us to be able to seize that moment and say, you know what? And here's how social studies fits. And then the next step might be, then what are the actions then that need to happen? We need to have social studies every day. I mean, when you look at this, even the digital literacy piece here, for example, is like understanding sourcing and corroborate. How we do that in, I don't have my pen with me, but I would think about in the social studies classroom, that means we source documents. Like, what does this look like? I kind of want us to think about, what does this then look like in real life? Classroom, that's what this looks like.
They said, here's the plan. Great, and then they said, so how is the state changing graduation requirements?
Actually doing, after we had
Trying to do that.
October, teachers were able to dive deeper into some of these, and one of them was digital literacy.
Exact same thing we've always done.
And showing the kids
These things, especially this word that I hate,
Collaboration,
reflect any of those things on those.
obviously,
Right?
the civic,
And these are like
financial, and
examples here, would be like we the people. Is a perfect example for
The STEM people are what we're measuring now.
the communication. Do you see how
Exactly.
social studies instruction all over the place here?
Right, and another thing
STEM people, this guy doesn't matter anymore.
that teachers have an option to participate in is the 6 Cs, so all of these things right here. But what does that look like in the social studies classroom?
You look at social science literature now,
That goes along with right here,
causation is done mathematically.
skills, and how to engage civically, so I think these are the skills around here,
Using math as a tool.
that I think are important, in addition to the content, that they're getting.
This is where this whole concept of having in next year.
I'm just saying, you're using kids to, the concept of using graphical representations. There's so much that is represented that way.
Yeah, about competencies, is that moving to?
Yeah, I know that, but maybe students don't understand.
So far we have 25.
We don't teach any application.
Yeah, that's what I was
If you
gonna
do,
say, they don't
I
want that
used to
piece.
teach this.
I think the.
In my world
though,
history
changed
class,
that.
there was a
And
big
really applying it
section
again.
in my world history class.
Like there are some teachers who do it.
Beginning modern discoveries and going to
Whole big history.
So it's kind of
And you still got people saying, if you bring in some paper
Oh,
like total real world application that they're practicing all of these now.
I know.
Totally understand.
So that's where, I mean, you know,
I think we're getting to the point, like, when I get feedback from other
Just this, there's nothing that social studies
One of the
doesn't
things
touch.
tell all of
Yeah,
our schools
nothing.
and how
Exactly.
broad
So
it
it's
is.
competency-based grading.
In the elementary.
like talking about a holistic,
Again, it's hard to do on a district level,
breaking down silos a little
where
bit.
they're all over the place. But advocates are super important. We did this in our district, Portrait of a Graduate, a couple of years ago.
Not just
All
isolated.
kinds of different.
Every single.
useful process to fill.
Yeah, with the whole district, it wasn't just social studies. Yeah. So all the teachers have been exposed to Portrait of a Graduate.
We had a wonderful one at my own high school.
Then you're.
We actually went online to Portrait of a Graduate.
And he taught science.
Everybody create their own talked about
I think it's the same way like what's happening here with math.
Talk
Like
about
if you just
portrait that's similar. You know, where are the patterns of what's
how you
What do you
measure.
think of the idea of creating some kind of online Google
skills
Doc?
of reading and writing, but
Just contribute ideas under each of these courses. Thinking of problem solving, what are examples in social studies classrooms that
but I think it increases that like.
Isn't everything you do
All of a
change?
sudden,
So I just saw, we have a great teacher on our team, he's ELA, and we have several.
Well, and in the ELA especially,
But it was interesting that
Because I have
for their learning target, there's that.
Teacher, the byproduct of that is the elimination of social sciences.
so is this,
But the focus was, how is our content helping us to get at the skill, to achieve that
even
skill?
that is a huge shift for some teachers who are like, I'm
others that are
Right.
limited to the, you know, to what they can do.
And so we still have a lot of work to go, but we're in the process because we've been exposed to this.
Yeah.
Secondary.
This is,
And that was kind of brilliant.
continuing,
I know exactly.
The skill
Well, the thing is,
of students to
isn't,
leave high school with some of these skills. And, you know, citizenship is one of those skills.
isn't the problem,
in the same way that.
And then you're focusing to students.
instruction rather
Still
than,
have your content,
which it should be. Instruction should be driving the test.
so I think it's completely focused on
Yeah,
social
I mean, the
studies.
piece is huge, and then the example of the content that supports that.
Developing and then reinforcing it.
I mean, you can take, as an example, you want to teach kids empathy.
It's the academic mastery, it's critical.
Civic, financial, and economic
maybe this
literacy.
one,
I guess social studies.
Whatever, doesn't matter, you know?
Yeah, yeah, so, anyway, that's
Alright,
something,
let's read.
that's the way we're doing it.
Thought,
Simply saying, let's use the framework as a way of.
But it's,
I had, yesterday, Jennifer, the curriculum director, said, finish that thought, not that, or she said, finish that sentence, not the paragraph.
yeah.
It's kind of a cute idea, it's like, it helps kind of read, especially for elementary teachers, if you want to teach kids like, the idea of what's a paragraph versus a sentence.
And let kids do it with courage.
So here's,
Super.
how do we make the most of this? How do we make the most of the energy here?
You should share what you said.
All right, so let's back up. Look at my second question, okay? Because we've expressed this concept that we want kids to be able to succeed, lead. We want them to have knowledge and skills. We want them to engage civically and lead meaningful lives. Now that's a beautiful. It's the reason why you get up and go to school and teach every day, even on those days when you're like, fifth period. I hate fifth period. I hate fifth period. I'm gonna yes. So, all right. So. Where does social studies fit? Do you see social studies in this document?
All over.
Right? I know, right? It's like everywhere. But not everybody sees that the way you do.
Because they don't know what social studies is.
So I think we have to make the case. I think we have to say, honesty, integrity, and responsibility. Here's what it looks like in a social studies classroom, for example. Or, and some of these, I mean, these are like, other than, when you think about an end-of-level test, show me what is accessible on here through an end-of-level test.
I tell you what our conversation ended up being yesterday at that meeting, because
please.
everything was focused on this portrait of a student. And they just said, what would teachers actually like? And we told them that we would like the removal of all end-of-level tests. Because everything on those end-of-level tests is teaching towards low-level Bloom's taxonomy. And it's really lost the art of the teacher. It's lost a lot of the opportunity to develop lessons that think critically and problem solve, because everything is geared towards those tests. And the state legislators and the school board members that were there yesterday said that's already in discussion and they will work on it. That's what they said. They're committed in the next 2 to 5 years to removing end-of-level tests. And are you hearing that also?
I'm not hearing that. That would be pretty shattering.
Well, that's kind of what we sat there and said, really? I mean, that was just like throwing out the biggest wish on the wish
So
list.
you're saying politicians told you what you wanted to
So let's talk about your social studies learning.
Yeah.
In terms of politicians and what they say. I'm just kidding. Okay. Now, that's the rub. Here's the challenge. What's the A word? I mean, look at these targets that we've got in terms of proficiency, and in terms of being able to say, if we don't have some kind of accountability measures, if we don't have some kind of something that's accessible, then that we can't articulate hitting those targets. So I don't know that we could ever do that. But what I am saying is that academic mastery is end-of-level testing, right? And even that, not necessarily, okay? But wellness is not assessed on civic, financial, and economic literacy. Not really, not in any kind of assessment, other than our civics test, which we'll talk about later. Digital literacy, no. And then all of these other pieces, they might be a part of an assessment in terms of communication or critical, but not really. I mean, these are so many kind of what we want for kids, what we want for our own children, what we want for our grandchildren. And social studies fits every single one. But we have to, I think we have to create some easy to digest document that says social studies fits here, and here's how, and give a couple brief examples. Like, for example, if you're looking at collaboration and teamwork, the We the People program, incredible teamwork aspect about collaborating on a topic. Generation Citizen, bringing people together, right? Creativity and Innovation, Utah History Day. Look at what those kids do with creating their own website about X, or performance. They're going to perform the life of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and right before your eyes, ladies and gentlemen, free of charge.
Well, they
Okay.
also communicate with those projects as well, not just verbally,
right?
but through whatever their project is.
The other piece that we talked about was how we can hit, like, for example, if we look at something like critical thinking and problem solving, that you're hitting that skill and you're doing it with content. That the idea is, here's content, social studies content that helps reinforce problem solving. How are we going to fix this issue? For example, I've got a lesson plan of a kid, parents who's watch a school bus drive past them on the way to school every morning. It never stops for their kid. And they're like, excuse me, can you stop and pick our kid up? Because it's 2 miles to the school, but why doesn't the school bus stop and pick up this kid?
It's not on.
Because the kid's black. And it's a separate but equal system. It's 1951, it's Connecticut, and these handwritten letters from the parents to the governor are one of the cases that then led to Brown v. Board. Okay? But in terms of problem solving, how am I going to fix this? I need my kid, it's freezing out and I can't drive this kid to school. So she's either gonna miss school, which is not acceptable, or we've got to figure something out. And so there's the content reinforcing. Do you think if we created something simple that said, bang, this is where social studies fits multiple grade levels, would that be useful talking point?
To what end? To try and encourage more adoption of social studies curriculum in schools? Is that the idea?
Yes, that's one. I mean, what else? What?
I think what is important to understand is, these targets are fantastic, and who can argue with them, and maybe we can even exceed them if we provide kids those opportunities for explicit social studies instruction. That provides context. And with context, students are going to be more literate, they're going to be more engaged, they'll be able to hit all of these ideas. And so it's, I think if we approach it from a sort of an isolated, that this social studies were as important or more important than this, it might not get any more attention than what it's already been given. But to show that social studies is integrated in each of these areas, to show how it's integrated in each of these concepts, because you can't have academic mastery without content knowledge. And social studies provides that content. You can't have critical thinking and problem solving without context and content. Understanding our past so we know where we are, so we know where we're going. All of those disciplinary thinking skills and disciplinary literacy habits of mind that will help students achieve this and perhaps exceed it, the targets that they've identified.
Yes.
Can we, does the term developing cultural literacies help us? In terms of situating kids in the present day in a very complicated society?
I'm writing that down. Do you see where that fits? Does that fit in with things like within a piece of this anywhere in particular? In this cultural literacy piece, there's the respect piece, right? There's also the making informed decisions under critical thinking, recognizing bias, finding solutions. Not so much. I mean, that kind of cultural skill set is probably the least explicit in this document.
That's critical. How do you gain civic literacy? And the way I think the civic literacy is defined in here is very, very narrow.
I agree with you.
That's really uncomfortably narrow.
For sure.
Yeah, because I can tell you that a lot of people, when they talk about civics, they talk about civics in a very constrained of learning how to be polite, learning how to be law-abiding, obedient,
Well, it doesn't match with what it says what the vision is, because if the vision is to engage civically, how do you engage civically if all you understand is various governmental and economic systems? Is that it? Is that the limit? That's as low as you get.
Maybe you have them finish the thought under and develop practical financial and civic participatory skills, or help them finish some of the thoughts in there. How much can you edit this, Robert?
There's no way.
None. Okay.
This is approved May 2019 by the State Board of Education. There was probably a feedback loop, possibly, but honestly, a lot of this doesn't even rise to my level of that I know about it until it's there. That's just the way it is. I still think there's enough social science stuff here that we can grab onto it. And I don't think any other discipline has done it yet, where they've said, here's how we fit in this. I think fine arts would start making a case. I think mathematics could start making a case. You know what I mean? But they don't need our help in terms of making their case. STEM doesn't need any more help. You know, they're doing just fine on their own. So, what do you think? Are there people here who would like how do you see this moving forward?
Pushing towards competency-based learning. Can we provide something that is measurable, that incorporates social sciences, so that the people making these can come back and say, here's a few checklisted items, so that we can show stakeholders that these kids qualify in civic mindedness or
If you
creativity?
flip that over to the other side, you see where there's this timeline of here's the data gathering and the creation of the portrait, and then this idea in spring 2020 of this discussions, which is where this kind of developing competencies, what does this look like? That's we've got to be a part of the conversation. You all have to be a part of the conversation, okay? To be able to articulate what does this really look like? So here's what I'll do, Brian. What we're going to create is a Google Doc where we're going to put this whole portrait of a graduate up. Each of these places will be there available for you to kind of throw ideas about examples, or examples specifically of competencies that can fit under each of these headings. Does that work? Does it start?
It seems that I'm going to the core, where you would pull from the core, and that's the other USB document, right? That
Right.
you want it. So, which would be fine for secondary, but the elementary one's gonna be in the process.
Yeah, I think that you can still look at the skills in elementary that you're developing, or what you're having students write about inspiring people from the past, or people who've been problem solvers in 4th grade.
So
Could still work.
Standards, which
Yeah, I mean they
encompasses a lot of the historic or social studies.
right, and I do love the emphasis on looking at the standards whenever we can. So if you do see, even because they're not, it's okay to link to them right now because they're not going anywhere for at least a couple of years. So let's use the elementary standards that we have. If they will reference well.
I think the Utah Core Literacy would reference better.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a problem. I think that's great to go ahead and put that in and say this is how social studies content can support that.
Well, and that's what, I mean, if you look, I've got it pulled up right now, just the elementary Utah Core Literacy Standards. You could take that and plug it right into a social studies. Right, I'm just looking at the, what are those called?
The anchor standards? Yeah, absolutely.
You could plug those right into social studies and then just differentiate by content.
I'd like us to create some kind of picture. People like an infographic. Even if this is making the case, if we get a chance to stand in front of legislators or social studies principals or whomever to say, if we say this, we really say this, then what it means is that we've got to have social studies happening. Good social studies instruction. Here's what it looks like. In Utah History Day is a great example. It needs to happen not just in elementary, but into the middle schools and into high schools. And We the People, and there are all these programs. Some of them have grown, some of them have kind of sat there. Grow better. Generation Citizen, that kind of action civics. Mock trials. All right. Anyway, thank you for kind of that. Any last thoughts on this? We'll move on. I find the irony is not lost on me that we give so much lip service in all of these documents to how critical and essential social studies is. And those are the class periods where we have picture day, or we pull out, all the kids have social studies. Well, that's when we'll do the assembly, or we can cut back on that, or we can do 1 trimester of Utah studies instead of 2 trimesters because we give kids more choice. All right, I just want to talk a little bit about competency-based and personalized learning, just to, this graphic has nothing to do with it other than it's just like measurement of the competencies. And I just want you to be thinking about, it's kind of funny because when people talk about competency-based learning, I'm like, well, what's the alternative? I mean, are we just dealing with incompetent learning? Is that what we've been doing? And the reality is that if it is about seat time, or if it's not about some kind of standards-based assessment, then it isn't really about competencies. It's about, we were joking about this science teacher who says, if you bring paper towels in for the lab, you'll get extra points. What is that teaching them, other than, the politicians will your palm one way or the other? So, and then there's a lot of conversation about personalized learning. You guys are hearing a lot of buzzwords about personalized learning as well. I mean, we used to talk about differentiated instruction, but now it's really about personalized and competency-based. You're going to hear a lot of conversation around this. Yesterday, a lot of that conversation then again was about that, correct?
I think they've even changed it to PC.
Right?
It's just
Personalized,
personal
competency-based learning, right? So if you were to define that, when you hear, especially when you hear personalized, what do you envision or what do you see?
It's what they need to.
Right? So each student is getting whatever they need in order to be successful in their learning. Tell that to the Utah Studies teacher with 38 class, right? I mean, we seem to think about how do we message this and how do we really get clear about because we don't want teachers to just the first thing they do is or they say, what do you mean? I have personalized learning all the time. Constantly thinking about how to do heterogeneous grouping with kids, and I'm thinking about the fact that some of those kids are working on their computers and some aren't, and some kids need this accommodation, and I think that a lot of times when people hear personalized learning, they also hear about one kid, one thing, a lot of this. And my concern there is that they do enough of this in their lives already. This amount of screen time that teenagers are spending has doubled since 2015. Doubled. You see 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds being babysat by these. And yet, a lot of classrooms need to be about this.
Think of it the other way around, that real personalized learning to its extent possible without a device. Place that you could visually provide students. Try and paper-base that, good luck. Unmanageable. Reducing it every year. So whether the technology is the focus or not, it is a requirement for significant personal learning.
And I don't think we can get away from those, or would want to get away from those tools.
I don't think we will.
Right. So then the question is, what are the best paths forward? I just want us to be a part of that conversation as well, right? So we can say, use this, but for that end. It's not just to learn how, I remember early days where kids in science class were learning how to make a PowerPoint, and it really wasn't about science, it was about learning how to make PowerPoint. That's not the point.
Yeah, but
either.
we got to the point though where now everybody without some experience of training or practice along the way they wouldn't have. So that was critical. When we used to hand out 10 years ago iPads to teachers, knew there was no reason for this other than teachers need to be very comfortable with the device, what it can do, what it can't do. Expensive and guided maybe, but absolutely essential to where the future's headed.
Robert, I was just thinking about this and exactly right in your comments. We have to remember that these things are true. should serve us. This discussion reminds me of the first quarter I was in college when we read Marshall McLuhan's Understanding Media, and the dystopian warning that was that our media, our technology would end up driving what we did in terms of learning and intelligence, rather than being the tool that served our purposes. And I see this everywhere. If you look on Education Week and a lot of the articles there are a lot of studies out there, good studies, that are indicating while technology is a useful tool in many ways, it's also doing a lot of harm in other ways. And we've got to be cognizant of that and keep it as a tool to achieve objectives that we have that are not based on the tool.
Right. I don't want to be a Luddite. I'm not saying come in and just put, it's annoying to me when everybody says put your phones away, because a lot of times there are really good teachers who know how to have kids use their phones doing research on a specific topic in class. And I know none of this is easy, but I do feel like that's a good example of, let's use it as a tool, not as the enemy, not as, or not. Whatever works for you, So I think as we're developing some of the competencies that we look at for this, we can also be thinking about, well, what does this look like? Because I do think that, one of the things that's really beautiful about, to harp on Utah History Day, is that Utah History Day is a great example of personalized learning, in the personal choice and autonomy regarding something they're interested in with the resources they need to create the product that they want to create.
That's not harping.
Competency-based gets at grading and credit. Right? Start talking about grading and credit and requirements, course requirements, or graduation requirements, or any of those things. That's a different conversation.
It's also complicated for a social studies class to kind of say, my students are competent in U.S. history. It's like, you've got your skills, but the content, they're not going to know everything about U.S. history. How could they? So it's interesting, especially when it comes to endorsements, and when we start looking at whether people need to move toward competencies rather than necessarily seat time or course completion, as how do you isolate skills and content in a way that equates to taking AP US history. All right, let's talk a little bit about micro-credentials really fast. I'm just trying to know, what do you guys know about them, or what are you working on? What are you carrying out in the field?
This is an alternative approach to professional development credits. Say you earn some credit in this specific area by meeting these sets of criteria. And it's got a lot of support at the state level. Possibility of moving towards that to replace seat time.
Kind of instruction and
It isn't instruction as much as it is, here are the requirements, can you meet those? Here's some resources that could help you meet these skills that you can do.
how do you know if somebody's met the skills? Do you have
There is a review. So the only ones that I've been involved with are technology. And it is, here's this little piece of technology skill. And it doesn't require you to learn PowerPoint or Google Slides. We don't care. That's not skill. But if you can show this, and this to somebody, a person who's looking at later, then you'll get your credit for that.
Basically, they don't care what application or
Right.
you use. Can you produce this product?
Yes.
Can you produce this?
And it's not just going to be technology, but that's just the ones I've been involved with.
Sometimes they're called badges.
Right, we get a little badge. You're badged with,
So
Excel.
back to your smart word comment. I was trained in using smart words, and so I think I'm relatively competent with them, but many are not. And you mentioned that than us with a smartboard. So under this micro-credential, I could come in and conduct a lesson using a smartboard to use whatever it is, documents, video clips. There's so many things you can do with them. But if I could do those things in a classroom, then I'd get some indication that I was competent.
But there wouldn't be one on smart boards because they're gone.
I was using smartboards 15 years ago.
Are these micro credentials used for license? Are they used
USB
for lane
credit.
change, or what are they used
If you
for?
go to Midas and then just click on badges, you can see a bunch that are already there.
So they're gonna change the terminology away from badging, just so you know. even
That's,
though,
well, that makes sense.
That makes
you know,
sense.
just to, and the one other piece that they're really looking at, it's kind of a shift, is the idea of you earn a micro-credential in PBIS. Okay? That the one missing piece that's been kind of missing in a lot of the micro-credentials is the actual application to show that you can then change things happening in the classroom. Like, so part of the micro-credentials in the future would include a demonstration that you took this positive behavior strategy in your classroom. Here are the results that you're seeing. Something so that you can actually see outcomes. That's some of the conversation I heard yesterday. I think makes sense. Yeah, so teachers would earn them through Midas. So they would go to Midas, which is the kind of the online portal for professional learning here at the state. There aren't a lot of social studies ones yet, but I mean, we could certainly see it. I mean, part of it is just the incentive. What's the incentive? If people don't need the lane change, if they do need lane change, great. But if they don't, what's the incentive? So, are there going to be are they going to be more marketable, for example? Is there going to be? Or some districts might say, we're going to base performance evaluations based on who knows what down the road they might do.
But I went to a training on it with Davis District once, and they talked about that once you do it, you can become a reviewer. And so for some teachers that had all the credit maxed out on the lane change, they did it so that they could make a little extra money here and there, being a reviewer of that micro-credential.
Great, money talks.
How transferable are these to other states, other jurisdictions?
Yeah, good question. Probably not. It's kind of like USB credit.
But if it becomes a leader in the region, then other states say, oh, we'll accept a Utah one.
Sure.
But we don't move teachers around that much.
All right, I just want to tell you about the McCarthy lecture really quick. It's November 9th. I'm sorry that's really small on the PowerPoint. But this is the McCarthy Family Foundation is the essay contest that I asked you guys to promote because the Aiden Gandhi, perfect name, right? Finalists were Aiden Gandhi from Roland Hall, Clara Keller from Timberline Middle School, and Giovanni Nuvan from Madeline Choir School in grades 6 through 8. And they got this. Jonah Carlson, a senior at Davis High School, won in the 750 word category 12, and will receive a check for $2,500. 8th grade won $1,500. It's just a great essay contest. Well, my point is, thank you very much for spreading the word. They got like double the amount of applications since last year, so that's great. And a lot of really great essays regarding the future of the free press in America. And the reason I bring this up is because this coming weekend, Saturday, November 9th, 7 o'clock at Roland Hall up by the University of Utah, is John Meekum, who spoke at the sesquicentennial. He was out here. He was the keynote speaker at the Golden Spike. He's a very good speaker, and he's a presidential historian, and this is a free lecture on the night. So I want to make sure people are aware of it. But just to celebrate the fact that Utah kids really rose to the challenge, thanks for spreading the word. I have another one here. The John F. Kennedy Profiles Encourage Essay Contest. You can win $10,000. not you, your students, okay? And kids have to write about someone who exemplifies political courage. And the deadline is January 17th. I'll put that in my listserv, send it out to you, okay?
What time is this?
It's 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock this Saturday. So the Free Press in America, Past and Present Challenges. John Meekum, you can Google him and see his talk like up at the that was great. All right, Kay, you want to talk a little bit about UCSS conference and about Harriet?
Yeah, so we just this past Saturday had our annual conference. We had just under 300 people attend, and
Let's just stop there for a second. Folks, we had 30 people coming to the Social Studies Conference. So Kay and her leadership, that's a pretty big deal. On a Saturday, on a lovely Saturday, a nice Saturday with football games and everything else, almost 300 people.
Okay, will this be an annual event then?
yeah, every fall we have a conference. Lots of great sessions. We had the keynote speaker who was a POW in.
So good. I just have to say, I bought his book even.
He spent 5 years with John McCain in Vietnam, so
Yeah. Had a lot of great
Funny.
stories.
it helped that his wife is a
Teacher.
teacher, so he knew exactly.
He kept relating it back to us and challenges that we have, so.
So it was great. And then there were lots of great breakout sessions. Peter had a lot of people attend about it. Lots of different topics. So it was really great. And then we're going to have, for UCSS members, they get 2 free tickets to go see this movie on the 16th of November about Harriet Tubman. So
really good reviews. So UCSS, so the Utah Council for Social Studies. So members of UCSS, and you become a member when you sign up for
the conference.
which
It's a
is
year membership.
it's a year membership, and it gets things like first dibs on 2 free tickets to the Harriet, which is also on a Saturday morning. So yet again, teachers going above and beyond and showing up on a Saturday, but in this case, there's popcorn and sub-plans.
There's always cool T-shirts and things
Yeah.
like that.
So, well done, nice job. Thanks again for. Would it be interesting to you to see a roster of?
Oh, we had people from Emory County,
Yeah.
Uinta.
Uinta.
We had a teacher who teaches on the Ute Reservation, Cache County, Box Elder, and then of course the local ones as well.
I had some friends from Uinta that came up and found me that I hadn't seen for 5 or plus years. And it was great. Mary Moulton was there. I hadn't seen her for years. She used to be on this committee. So there were a lot of.
You do
And-
lunch?
And
And one of the people that I worked with, Scott, as a presenter, was a professor up at the U. And he couldn't shut up about how much fun, how much he loved it, how much he wanted to be looped in on this, Rich Medina.
Oh, great.
And he loved it. And his session was a big hit as well. He did the one on hate groups. But he wants to be involved. And so there was a lot of enthusiasm among both presenters, participants, people like.
It's really, I mean, people have to think about the fact that on a shoestring budget with all volunteer board, the Utah Council for the Social Studies just pulls off a really great event. And, other states would kill to have the numbers of teachers that we have show up. We also have some really great participation from methods professors who Janae Overson at BYU, has her students come up.
Jeff Notes.
And now we already had somebody from Utah State who's like, oh, we want to make sure next year our methods teachers, our kids come down as well. So, all right, Judy, welcome. Judy Hillman is here as well. Just at the morning, I told her she wouldn't have to show up for the whole thing, but we're going to talk about the civics test. And I need your brains. So, as you know, we have a high school graduation civics test. I think it's an easy answer to a complex issue. And many kids see it as a hoop. Anybody here want to argue with me about either of those things? Well, there are legislators, including the legislator who helped co-sponsor the original bill, also agrees. They want a different option. They don't think that for all sorts of political reasons, they can just say, well, let's get rid of it. And I don't necessarily want that either. But I'd rather have something better. The districts can then say, oh, we can do this instead. I don't know whether that means that a new legislation would say, you can keep doing this, or if you really care about your kids, you'll do this. Or Utah can do better, so we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to do this instead. Or if the legislation will die, or if the legislation, if they'll come up with even yet something else. Okay? I mean, there are lots of ifs out there. But we have an opportunity right now to think about what this civics option might look like. The devil is in the details, folks, because it's one thing to say, you know, we want to be civically engaged. We want all of our high school graduates to exemplify it by doing X. That's why we have a civics test, because people, if there were some other easy way to measure it, we would have done that instead. So we have a chance for more rigor, a chance for more meaning in terms of if we really mean when our students graduate, they are civically engaged, then what does that look like? And if we do it right, then as the implementation occurs, we're going to have civically engaged students, which is what we're saying we want, and we really will be a national model. Because states around the country are grappling with this. So I have sent you an email with this link to this document, I believe. Or you can just click on it, I think, can you just click on your PowerPoint?
It didn't come up. I'm just putting it.
So I'm going to see if I can go to it from here. I'm going to escape out of this PowerPoint in a second and spinning spiral. So I'm going to go. I'm going to go to my Google Drive up for you. I tried to
Several of you are in it right now.
Okay.
Great. Yeah, I'm going to try to find it on here. I've only, as you can see, got a few tabs open. And so Judy's here because Judy and we've been doing a lot of research on this issue. Pull it up. But when you find the doc, Judy, what's the name of the doc? And I can
Strengthening Utah civics graduation requirement options.
see if it's in. I don't know if you shared it. I don't know if I put it in my drive yet.
It says that you're in it.
Will you share it with you?
I know. I mean, I swear that I know. Tell me about it because I tried
Looks
to
like
get.
it has a blue thing that's up in the tab.
All right. Thanks. Amber, do not mock my open browsers.
That's okay. I sent a screenshot to someone the other day and there was like 24 up there and they're like, can you calm down on the tabs?
I had a friend of mine who shared his screen on a webinar, and over in his inbox, under emails, he had 5,000 unread emails.
Oh my gosh. Just
I was
delete them
like,
all.
just start over. Just send an email that says, my email crashed, and right. Okay, so you've got this, here's a white paper that, I don't know, somebody at this table threw together in like half an hour. That would be Judy Hillman. It was brilliant. And basically kind of lays out the framework about the fact that in terms of the statistics regarding voting and some other options that that are out there. And then here's some state models in terms of the stuff that we're doing. And some states don't even require a U.S. government citizenship course like we have. And, you know, civics is in our standards, embedded in a lot of ways, but there's no middle level. We don't have a middle school civics requirement. Although 8th grade U.S. history does have a lot of civics concepts, I would argue in 8th grade U.S. history, at least civics in the standpoint of like constitutionally concepts, right? And then these are some examples of what states are doing or have done regarding approaches to trying to get at this concept of civically engaged, right? So Florida does now have they have a middle school civics course that's a requirement. Some people feel like part of the reason, and Jeff Noakes would argue that some of the reason why kids were so articulate and organized after the Parkland shooting is because they were much more civically aware. A lot of it also has to do with social status in class and access to levers of power, but that being said, they also had civics instruction. So that, then, in terms of like engaged kids who take informed action when they see an issue, that excites a lot of people because that's the concept of civic engagement they really like. It also scares a lot of people because there are some people who are like, the last thing they want to see is young people who are civic. They throw the bums out. And that's just a reality. I mean, you know. In Illinois, there are some requirements here. So I want you to take a look. Here's the task, okay? California, and you've got links to these laws. Here's California currently developing what's called a seal of civic excellence. So students could earn a seal that would go kind of like the seal of biliteracy that would go on their diploma if they, and part of this writing for me is my writing to Elizabeth Waite, who's one of the legislators interested in some kind of better legislation. Looking at the seal, the issue for me is I don't want something that is too onerous for the teacher, right? So think about that. So there's a lot of stuff here about the California seal and links to what that might look like. Massachusetts has a new law that's looking at project-based civics. So Texas project-based civics and Nebraska. Nebraska's bill is you can have an alternative civic assessment beyond the citizenship, right? So it's like go to a zoning meeting and then write about it and report on it. And
The Boy Scout thing.
right. And part of it, I mean, that's the challenge, especially with a requirement that is like service oriented, or is it that's there's this concept of the Matthew effect where the rich keep getting richer. This concept that kids who have access to, hey mom, can you drive me over to the zoning meeting? I gotta do this report. That's no problem. But somebody who's like, hey mom, I know you're working tonight and I'm taking care of the kids again, but I have to get this thing done or I'm not gonna get my seal. It's like, well, it ain't gonna happen. So, what we have to think about is what would make sense in Utah rather than the civics test as a high school graduation requirement. So one idea is project-based, some kind of project-based mastery of civics skill, like Generation Citizen or We the People, not We the People, but Project Citizen. This idea of kids identify an issue. Okay, well, if you go to the state core, so I'm opening another tab.
And we're noted.
So you go to social studies. One of the issues is in the core standards for U.S. government and citizenship, a course that was designed to guarantee that kids were civically engaged before they graduated from high school. That what you've got is standard 2.2. I just want you to go there for a second. This is civil liberties, civil rights, and responsibilities. This is about how American citizenship brings with it civil liberties, civil rights, and responsibilities. They need to know their rights, understand the extent. They also need to defend their own rights and the rights of others. And if you look at 2.2, it says this. Students will examine various perspectives on a current rights-related issue, take a position, defend that position using the Constitution and Bill of Rights, historical precedents, Supreme Court decisions, and other relevant resources, and share that position, when possible, with relevant stakeholders. That's already a standard in U.S. government and citizenship. Is that, if kids did that, is that enough? Is that enough closely aligned to kind of project-based learning? Okay, so that's an idea. So when I'm just throwing out ideas, and I want us to kind of think about, because it's one thing for legislators to say, hey, guys, we don't like this, we want something better. What do you think? And if we're like, well, I don't know, it's kind of complicated, that's not the answer they're going to want. We have to come up with some idea that's going to work, and that makes sense. Brian, you've got an online.
Yeah, so Peggy from online, how about talking to folks in city, county, state government and ask if they could hold some of the meetings in schools so students could attend during the day and achieve that civic seal, as opposed to after school and having to work with that kind of scheduling problem.
That's a really great idea in terms of like trying to figure out how do you have a roving band. I mean, we just have begun to get some students on some committees here, like serving on like school board ad hoc committees and things. But yeah, that's certainly an idea if we wanted to try to do that kind of civic seal.
And I found in my experience in the classroom when I've reached out to civic leaders, they've all been more than willing to come in and meet in classrooms and arrange their schedules. And so maybe it's not something as formal as like an actual meeting per se, but maybe it's just saying, hey, these local leaders are going to be here in our school today. As part of this seal that you're going to get, you need to be part of that meeting and discussing current issues and things with them too. So it could maybe be a little bit broader than just what do they do on a community council meeting.
I think of the civic requirement as so much bigger than attending. And I mean, that's like one thing you could do. So much more than that, and it's hard to just say, if you do this one or two things, then you check that box as you've met the civic requirement. I don't know. It is hard because I don't think there's any one best way to do this.
But it would be great if it was project-based civics, if the students were choosing what they wanted to do and create a plan for achieving it. That could be one thing, but there could be multiple things that they.
I like the 2.2 pointed out there, Robert. I think something along those lines of thinking more broadly about issues, Constitution, rights. What do we do with that? I think those things together, that's probably getting more at it.
If you don't want to make it more arduous for teachers, it would be needing to look at it as maybe giving it an elective option to be taught, like as a semester class elective option, that kids who want to do this instead of the traditional test would take this class, and that's where they'd work on the project. I think try to do it within the existing government core as it stands. That would put a lot of pressure on teachers to try and still figure out how do I teach everything else that's in the core while also giving adequate time to this project.
Let's say this matters, that doesn't.
So I just had a thought. So with the high school graduation requirements and kind of going even to back to the personalized learning, my daughter who just graduated, she had to scramble her senior year to get her CTE credits because she just wasn't interested in those classes. My son, who's now going to be in 9th grade next year, thinking about high school graduation, he's not interested in fine arts classes and trying to figure out how he's going to get those credits so he can graduate from high school. So I wonder if there is a way that if they were to take something like an elective like that, that it could count for some of those other types of credits that maybe they're not interested in taking a music class or something like that, but it could count for a CTE class or something like that if that's not where what they're interested in.
Also, too, you look at these numbers with so few young people voting. I wonder how many students don't know how to register to vote, don't even know the basics of doing that. I don't know if is there any way to work in like a voter registration thing? I was just thinking about the Utah League of Women Voters today too, about getting kids.
If you go to the standard 2.3, that's where you pull in the voting, because it says understand the purpose and importance of fulfilling civic responsibilities, and voting is included. So if you did, you could even do a combination of those two standards.
The standards each have a section on civic preparation that precedes. I'm just looking at the Utah Studies one for 7th grade, and it says engage in deliberative, collaborative, and civil dialogue regarding historical and current issues. Identify local, state, national, or international problems. Engage with solutions to these problems and share their ideas with apply knowledge of governmental structures and then develop and demonstrate values that sustain. So, I mean, there's some options there, and then how that might look. That could serve as the frame, parameter with which that's under. I mean, then that would eliminate like the one-time drop in at a meeting and all that civic competence.
Right, I mean, that's the challenge, right? I mean, now, California, in terms of their seal, the link there, and I've got the state seal up here in terms of the criteria for the development, they created kind of a draft criteria for what the seal would look like. I'll pull that up here. I can't do this because the dialog box is open, but I can't find the dialog box. So therefore, there is no way I can pull anything else new in Word right now because there are too many tabs open. So, and I don't know if I can even close this.
Robert, I know you're open to ideas, but are you thinking that you favor a seal over a graduation requirement?
I'm open to ideas.
Okay.
What do you think? What's the, what are the pros and cons to either concept? To like this kind of, one idea would be like if you want to add this value added thing to your diploma of a seal, you would then go for to add versus something we require of all students.
I personally think it would be better if it's required, because who is going to go after those seals? It's only going to be the same kids who are probably already civically engaged and are going to be civically engaged, and it's not the other 75%. It's going to just be the top kids in the school. 5%. Yeah. We're going to go after them.
Kids are going to have their seal on their.
Because they're the ones who care.
I mean, I'm not leaning one way or the other, but I mean, I do think that politically, it would be hard to say, we're gonna get rid of the requirement, and now we're gonna make this thing optional. I think that the interest at the legislative level is we have this high school graduation requirement, it's not enough, we want something better, but it's still a requirement.
Well, okay, but the other option is to say, let's look at how they design the seal and say it's required and here's what's opposed to saying it becomes a seal. Formality of what we've been talking about.
Yeah,
If
rather
the
than
standard
seals
is already there in our standards, we're really just talking about a formalization of that or definition of what it looks like.
Right. If you go to the link that I can't go to, because I have a mysterious dialogue box, that Brian and I will have to ferret that out later. You're gonna see that the criteria for the seal in California is kind of a menu of options. You have to graduate from high school. Then you have to get at least a C- in your civics class, okay? And then in addition to that, you have to do one of the blah, blah, blah. And there's like there's service learning, there's attending a meeting, right? I don't know how workable that is with U.S. government and citizenship teachers. If for one, it's this move away from the fact that the civics test right now could be administered in 8th grade if you want, and you can just be done.
Right.
That's what we're
Now
doing in our district.
what we're doing is moving towards something that is more appropriate for juniors and seniors. People who are taking the U.S. government and citizenship course or the equivalent. The first question is, what do you think about that shift from multiple possibilities and multiple grades meeting the requirement to this is kind of a capstone thing that occurs when you're a senior?
Do all districts teach U.S. government as seniors? Because I feel like there's some that do not.
Ours are juniors or seniors.
Some take it as, I think, sophomore year, Civ, and then U.S.
I don't think it would matter. It's just that it would be tied to
Yeah.
that course. The idea would be that you would tie it to the course. That's one idea would be that you would tie it to the
I
course.
think it seems more appropriate to do it at that age, because you're almost of voting age. You know, you're in that mindset when you're 17, 18. How are you going to be applying these things? We give the civics test in 8th grade, right? You know, them being 18 might as well be 20 years from now. You know what I mean?
First try.
On the first try, I don't know. I have to go look.
We are 83. This last year.
We have less, in a school of 1,000, maybe less than 15 that come from.
Give a pretest on it, and I would say, before we get to any instruction or anything, I'd probably down the pretest.
You're saying, I mean, it's not a valid assessment. It's not a valid assessment. It's a baseline DOK 1 reinforcing of the worst aspects of civics. It's memorizing the capitals, you know? That's not the point of civics instruction. So we need something better. That's the argument. But what's the better? So that's where I need your. Does it make sense to tie it to the standards in the U.S. government citizenship course? Sure. Make sense?
I like Kay's idea too of, is it Kay? Potential option to attach it to another elective also is that an option to,
Like it's its own elective course.
because if you could do fine arts, I mean, I don't even know if that's possible, but mix fine arts with government and develop a project with the idea of how might we solve this problem, and I don't know. I mean, does it give us an option?
You ever read artistic stuff that's tied to like historical things, like
Oh, never. Yeah.
like Hamilton? I don't know, maybe.
Well, but we lose, in that civics class, we lose some of the service learning options that in some of the other states or
But then that's a way for them to, if they did have a service learning class, then they could do a service learning type of an activity that could focus on fine arts, or could focus on CTE things or whatever, and they could do the service, but get that other credit at the same time.
Well, I think it comes back to the idea too that we talked about with this, is that social studies is embedded into everything. So whether you're doing something that's art related or CTE related, the skill of the fact that you're getting involved in your community to improve something, that's social studies. So it should be able to count in both places. I think that would just be an argument that would have to be made with the art people and the CTE people to get them on board.
And that there's a stipulation that the credit students get depends on the qualification of the teacher of record. And I don't know if that's the case for elective courses as well, but for core courses it is.
Here's a question I'll throw at you. How many, just in your gut, or if you know, I mean, U.S. Government Standard 2.2, which I put up there, students will do this, defend it, right, and share that position when possible with relevant stakeholders. How often is that currently occurring in U.S. government citizenship courses? These are the new not relatively new standards.
Well, I think that they all cover that to a degree. Sure that they examine various perspectives.
Sure, it's the relevant, or to share it with stakeholders. Teach it. They talk about it. They talk about it in class. They talk about it with other teachers or with their teacher. But
Do we have data on, I mean, I know California has data, for the data. Do we have data on students' perception or students' actual engagement in the kind of activities?
I tried to find what I could have. Smattering of data. Volunteerism among students. So we have the voting statistics, which don't look good. Volunteerism, if you're comparing us to other states, you might not want to do that because it's pretty awful across the board.
I was thinking to have the data to develop that compelling story for why. We have to be clear on what our outcomes are and then work towards that.
Right, and you can look at volunteerism, but the only problem with volunteerism is that it's not necessarily going to cover service learning, right, where there's civic learning outcomes tied to it. It could just be community service entry, which has great value for a whole bunch of reasons, but it doesn't get at the sort of civic.
Kids aren't thinking about, like, what are the systemic issues of poverty and why is, they're just making lunches, which is, and it's like, it's not why do people litter, it's just you're picking up the litter on the side of the street. It's different, and I think that that's part of the challenge.
Towards the end of this little document, I tried to pretend that, it were up to me, here's what I would do. And whatever you decide to do in terms of strengthening the graduation requirements or whatever you want to do, I think you're going to have to have an assessment with that you will, you want to activate. There's the, NAEP?
Well, the NAEP civics assessment across the board shows the proficiency in civics is in the basement, and has been. The problem with the NAEP is that it's just a sample, so there's not enough data. You can't disaggregate the data to see whether Utah is doing any better or worse than Florida. If Florida has a 8th grade civics assessment, we don't know whether that's having an impact because it's just we don't have enough numbers to know that. They're trying to see if they can increase the numbers of kids who take the NAEP, so we could then disaggregate that data and be able to see state-to-state comparisons, but we can't do that right now.
Does that assessment do a good job of measuring?
Well, that's the other question. I mean, the NAEP does it has some aspects of it, but again, it's like it's a hard nut to crack, right? It's like trying to get at, well, what do we mean? When we talk about civic engagement, are we talking about somebody that knows that there are 3 branches of government and you vote in November and you, right?
Yeah.
Or is it somebody who's like, oh, if there's people are, racing down my street late at night, I need to talk to, who would I call? I'm not calling the president. Who do I call? Who's my city council member? How do I get a hold of them? How do I talk with them? What's the, is that civic engagement, or is that enough? Or is there something else that needs to be considered, right? That's where we're stuck, folks, because we need some measure that's going to replace the civics test. And that's why I keep going back to the standards as, if I, as a high school teacher, were to say, these students were masterful at doing this, they can explain why voting is so important, and if they could do that, then we should be able to check them off as being civically engaged.
To me, we're talking here a lot about, first of all, motivation. How do you get the kids to want to do these things? I'm thinking back over my political involvement, which for many years was very strong. What first motivated me to get politically involved? Fear of dying in Vietnam. I went out into the streets and I lobbied against that. And when I finally pulled a draft number near the bottom, I was in the first draft lottery, that increased the fear and it got me into the Army on my terms. But every action I took, and I mentioned Utah vote, we wanted to vote because we wanted to be able to vote if we were going to potentially die. Now, the question is, just food for thought, how can you artificially communicate these kinds of fears, the kind of fear that somebody has who's on the street, who can't find a place to live? All of the public issues we have are motivated by somebody that is hurt, fearful, being marginalized. How do you communicate to these kids what it's like to be a marginalized farm worker? I got involved with that. And how do you communicate what it's like being a marginalized person of color in Utah today? Because we know there's a lot of those kids who are suffering from serious things and less serious things as well. And we know from the data that was just published that they are the ones that lag in educational achievement. So the question is, how do you communicate artificially some of the fears, some of the disturbances that lead people into action? I don't have an answer, but I think that ought to be something that is thought about, because if you can't do that, you're not going to really get kids being involved. I've talked to them and they don't.
I think that the issue for us is building that empathy, so it's not artificial. We have to think about, like, that's part of what Generation Citizen does, is kids take on an issue they care about. I've never seen high school kids wanting to serve on the budget committee for the local school district so they can help make decisions about where resources are allocated. Are you kidding? You're volunteering to serve on the budget committee? But they found out that there was a budget committee, and that's the point. It's like, so clean air is not necessarily a marginal issue. That's an issue that a lot of kids could care about. I think as a classroom teacher, you would have to help students kind of understand that. My issue is that I don't want to hand teachers yet another thing that they have to do to check off with the seal of civic, if it were a seal, like, all right, let's see if you've done everything that but if it's tied specifically to what we're asking students to do in the high school graduation course, here, especially in Strand 2, that seems like it would be sufficient. I don't know.
Nobody's
Yeah, Jesse, sorry.
We had over 1,000 students participate last year, either through Generation Citizen or through the National Geographic GeoInquiry project process. And how do you get kids engaged? It's on the skill of the teacher, right? So your teacher, but we provided them for Graphic, and then Generation Citizen provided for those teachers support and professional development. So the teachers loved it, but they needed that time and space to learn how to shift that way of instructing and really releasing control while guiding students and making sure that they're meeting, standards and things like that. So couple of things. One, it's not, as much as it is a social studies thing, it's not exclusive to social studies. As much as teachers like it and want it, we have to be careful that whatever we change, we're going to be able to provide the kind of support that teachers are going to need to be able to do this successfully.
Right, I mean, the idea with the legislation, I'm talking with Representative Johnson, Representative Eliasson up at the Capitol, and part of the conversation was money for professional learning for teachers, so they could then successfully implement whatever it is that we're talking about. So there would be that piece that would have to happen, because I just don't think a lot of necessarily every U.S. government and citizenship teacher is teaching U.S. government and citizenship in a way that says, okay, use your power, learn how to do this, send that.
A question.
Go ahead. Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
So-
Go ahead.
I think that all of the new core that we have for the secondary has that civic engagement, and if the teachers are really doing it, then the kids are getting that rigor, and they are learning to become engaged citizens. The problem will still come back to, unless they're tested on it, there are still a lot of teachers who aren't going to, they're going to keep doing the same thing. The geography teacher next to me still colors the maps and makes them memorize every single country in the world. It's, even though the core changed, doesn't matter. There's not a test, and so it's still going to be exactly how it's always been. And there are a lot of social studies teachers who are going to be the same way unless there's something that's holding them accountable. Even though the core says it, doesn't mean they're going to do it.
My old school, when I was teaching, used to have a comprehensive service learning program that was 9 through 12, increasing requirements each year, embedded in the classes. And we had one person in the school that coordinated this for the whole school. But a lot of those kids I have known over the years, they got engaged through the service learning program we had. And some of them now are reporters, some professors, people who really got their involvement initially through a really rigorous service learning. Question, is that still being done? I know Norma Jean was doing it up in the Davis district for a long time. And are there programs like that? Because from the data we collected, very successful in getting kids involved. Just what's the status of that, and is that something we want to look at?
You're closer to kids than I am, so what are you seeing? Organized service learning.
It's very
School
organized.
level, but not district level.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I asked.
I don't have a single secondary school that doesn't have at least one service learning class or club that operates with a number of.
They seem to be getting kids to be engaged in political life.
Well, it's not as much political as it is service learning and
Southern Utah, about 10 years ago, the history department chair left the history department to start the service learning. But back into history, and SUU closed the service learning department. Canceled all the service learning projects and the requirements for graduation, saying that meaningful. That's happened this year. Then our school district in Washington County also has kind of steered away from asking for us to try to. That's been tough to
UVU has
watch.
come down there in the last 2 years as well.
Do you see service as an essential component? It's not a part of the high school graduation requirement now. should it be? Is it essential? I mean, because in terms of driving that, if for whatever reason we were able to get a high school graduation requirement that included aspect of service as either an option or as one of the requirements, would you support that or not?
Well, it's right there.
So, one thing I was looking at in drafting this and sort of like which states to pay attention to was just sort of thinking about what are Utah's strengths when it comes to civic engagement. And there's one thing that stands out, and you know that you serve is very proud of, and I'm very proud of actually, is that we are the land of service. We statewide networks and resources to connect anyone by zip code to any meaning service. Now, does the service opportunities available, are they necessarily connected to civic learning? Most not, but were we to sort of build on that and have some kind of service learning requirement, that requirement can, because one of the things that you see in the literature on best practices, like from that the most effective service learning really involves creating bridges between schools and the community. And if we're talking about that, then we might think whatever we want to do, if you want to do anything at all, is to think about building on this infrastructure for community service in Utah on the one hand. The other thing I was recommending was, you know, we love local control. Some school districts that are doing wonderful things and some that might need just a little incentives. So what I was going to suggest was something in between requirement and a seals approach, which school districts were to be required to come up with a plan for a service learning requirement. Then they could design it how they want, or they could have a menu of things that they could look at. So Salt Lake City schools go to town on action civics, but another district might take a more traditional approach that builds on service learning opportunities, but builds civic learning around those opportunities. And you would be able to incubate different innovations and compare how they do, but also you would be able to really allow school districts to invest in what they're good at and what they have appetite to do. Some of them don't want to do action civics, and I think that's
Luckily, this is all being recorded, so we can just like think about this, cogitate about this for a while. But we don't have all day, you know. I mean, in terms of we have got to have a plan that we can then put into code. It can be passed by a legislature that's chomping at the bit. If we don't have something better than what we have, we'll end up with still stuck with the civics test, or have something that you don't want to live with.
What's your deadline?
They want to start working on it.
I kind of going back to your other question, I do think that service should be a part of it, because when the kids are doing service, whatever it is, whether it's in a food pantry or whether it's whatever the service is, they are seeing the needs of the community, and when they see the needs of the community, then they're leaving their bubble a little bit, and they are able to take that step to possibly then get more engaged and find more ways that they can help in the community.
You can still, I think anybody doing service, if asked or required by the teacher, could begin to connect the dots between whatever issue they're providing service on and the larger civic issues. Even if you're providing childcare or tutoring, it's like, well, what's the issue here? Why isn't there, you know, what are the missing pieces earlier in that kid's education? I mean, you know, you just name any issue. The kids are, if you're helping in a food bank, there's, you know, it's like, how is this possible in a land of plenty that we have fruit banks, you know? I mean, whatever. So I do think that you could make that civic connection with service. I think service, it sounds like some piece of service as an option. What do you think about this idea of a menu of choices that a district would select from? They would decide, you'd have to have your own plan at the end. And if you wanted to opt for, I mean, I want to know this. If I said, okay, you could still do the civics test as an option, what do you think about that?
I would. I would.
So then I think we have to say, we're not doing that anymore.
I agree. If we've already said from this level or whatever level, it's not a good option, then why would
The only reason we would keep it
we
is
keep it? Because it's holding a place.
keep it as a placeholder until we come up with something better. But if we come up with something better, which is the whole idea behind the legislation, we can say we're doing this. And we have to say Utah can do better. That's my
Points of leverage. I want to point out that 2 civics conferences ago, when we brought in Sid and Bill Price from Just Serve, it's an excellent service kind of next to you by zip code. It's run by the LDS Church, but it's non-denominational. I had some really good conversations with them about whether they might be open to building opportunities, and they were really quite interested. And we about, you know, providing support, let's say, from the youth serve level or from Robert's level, so that we have lesson plans built around certain types of community service.
Things you said, we have models of very successful programs around Utah. I'm thinking at a conference I attended recently, there's a program for refugee resettlement up in Cashtown, Moreover. I think it's run through 2 ladies that talked about it, were sociologists in Utah State. And they run a very successful program for integrating refugees into the community, helping them acclimate and so on. There are models, I think, all over this state of things like that. And I think we ought to look at a few of the models and see which ones are successful, which ones are. I want to reiterate, too, what Robert said. Got to be really careful that this just doesn't become another darn thing that teachers have to do. Got to, you know, sense, get their minds right. You got to help them see value in this, because teachers can drive this and can do it well. That was our big challenge with our program, which I think we did successfully, but it took some education.
Just like you were saying.
Yep. Okay.
So Peggy online, I think a menu of options is a great plan, as long as we remember service learning has to be connected to the core. Secondly, true learning happens during reflection, so building in time to reflect is vital as well.
And Peggy's done so much work on service, and what I call it academic service learning, and it's really, I would encourage you to try to use that. Like I say, public charter school as often as I can, so people don't forget that charter schools are publicly funded, and I say academic service learning because it's about the academic skill set that we're developing as well as the service piece. And she's done a lot of work over the years with elementary methods teachers and social studies, connecting service at some level in her classrooms. All right, is there anyone here other than Judy who'd be willing to keep this conversation going? Because I need your brains to help hash out, maybe meeting with there's a legislative analyst who's starting to write a bill. So is anybody here who's like, you know what, I really want to see something good out of this. I'm willing to keep the conversation going. It might be just a Zoom conference. It might be a meeting, another meeting.
I'm interested in keeping the conversation going, but I don't necessarily have time to go up and meet with.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We can
do all of that kind of stuff.
But you're willing to keep in. We'll
I'm
keep you
interested in the conversation.
I've got a little bit more flexible schedule, so if I need to go up on the hill. Stasha Wheeler.
So Brian, can you make a note of that? So Stasha, Jesse, Corey. You. Obviously, as you can see, this is not easy. If it were easy, it'd be done by now. There are states that have tried to do something. I want us to have the model. I want us to have a really great model. I think a seal, honestly, maybe not, but it's also an option. And I think that for us, having it as a requirement has more teeth. So
I was thinking that maybe getting somebody like Joe Briscoe involved in this. He's a former social studies teacher for years.
Yeah.
And there are a number of teachers who have been involved with politics, civics, and things like that. Some of them are part of this conversation.
yeah, I mean, that might be the other thing that I guess what you could do if you're not able to serve is also think about who teaches U.S. government and citizenship. Your district is a rock star. Then I want who, and you don't have to tell me who, but then you have to tell me who teaches U.S. government and citizenship who's not a rock star. Because we have to reach both of those. The rock stars aren't going to be the problem. Okay? It's that teacher who's like, give me a break. So I want something that is they're going to be excited about, or at least they can do.
Oh, it strikes me,
Sorry, is there a rural social studies leader on this list? Because I think that's
On what list?
the Bessie, Corey, Stasha, Peter list.
Santaquin, that's pretty no.
Well, we had
before I
iron.
forget, if we're thinking, and I don't know if we are or not, about civics character education conference for next year, that process, that might be a place to try and get teachers, age them in this, if we can have
Oh,
something.
yeah,
like
definitely.
that.
But by then, the legislation, I mean, theoretically, the legislation will be passed.
Is there a time, I mean, are they trying to pass something in this upcoming session?
Oh, yeah. They want to build. They want language.
And we're likely to have a revenue surplus. Now's the time to grab some ongoing money.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the other piece. One, we need PD. Teachers need PD if they're going to do this, right? It's
If you leave it a little bit more open-ended, like you recommended in saying, let's allow districts to kind of decide what that requirement's gonna look like. When we do the law, can we date it where we give ourselves a year to do some research and investigation, prepare resources for teachers before we say, now it's implemented and it's required?
Yeah, because here's what probably happens with most legislation like this. From my recollection, it would be that they can't just implement a high school graduation requirement like for this graduating class,
Right.
you know? So, and I don't really know when
No, and I
they
think
may
that
even be able to say for the graduating class of X.
that's what they did on the original, the civics test. I'm trying to remember if it was 1 or 2 years that they went out.
Right.
But that, I'm just saying to pull in that piece of just saying, give us some time to put resources together and then it goes.
Brian, can you shoot Norley a really quick email for me? Yeah. And ask her if she's got the roster of people who applied to Senate Youth. All right, so we're moving on. Thank you for your brains. Appreciate it. Really wanted one of you to come up with the simple answer. Yes.
I and another person I know signed up to judge for it. I haven't heard back from them. We signed up a long time ago. Are we judging? Are we not?
Yes, you're judging. Norley is the person who's coordinating it.
Do that.
So,
I signed up too, and I haven't.
I just
But
wondered
I'm
because
still anticipating that I'm gonna judge.
yeah, I am too. I put
We
it on
need
my
you.
calendar, but
plan on it.
at the same time, there was no confirmation. Think about
It's
that.
still 2 weeks away.
It's still 2 weeks away. What do you want? You chop? Come on. Right. Yes, please. Wait.
I'm planning on it.
What I need is the roster, and then you and I will talk. Brian and I will make sure that those get sent out. Thanks. It's good to know that you're not getting. So it's November 15th. This is just so you know, the United States Senate Youth, and what I wanted and what I asked for and didn't get was the roster of all the kids who applied, so you could see whether your districts are applying or not. I will send you that roster because every kid every school can send 2 students per high school. And this year, what I did is we sent out a Google form. I don't think I have access. No, I didn't send out a Google form. I had Norlie create it in Qualtrics. That's why I can't get it for you. So in Qualtrics, she sent it out, and people, their name, the counselor could just put the 2 names and the emails of the kids they were recommending and just send it, click. So we got more than double. Had over 80 applications this year. We had like 40 some last year. We have about 60 turned in their portfolio,
Oh, that's good.
which is great. That means we need, I mean, that was why I was saying help judge, please, because it's be careful what you ask for. But it's a great experience for kids on that day. So if you're able to help, great. If not, I understand. But it's 2 $10,000 scholarships, unrestricted for these kids, and a week in Washington, D.C. And so every year, 2 kids from every high school can be nominated and can come participate. Even in the day, it's great training just on civic life because they do extemporaneous speeches and they do roundtable conversations as a part of the day, and they get to hang out with other cool nerds like them. So that's
How hard would it be if Norley has a list, or you, those are sent to, just to say in our district, at this high school, it goes to this.
It would not be hard. We can.
Because I know exactly who in our schools, and they need to.
And I still take the information and send it to all the student council.
I walked it around this year, and I would expect to see we got a lot more.
I would like to see if we have any.
Yeah, right. So part of the issue is I have none of the responsibility, I have all the responsibility, none of the authority, because I actually asked someone else to do this. But we will do that. We can create an easy way to ask you, so we'll send out to the leadership, who should we reach out to for Senate Youth? What's their email address? And so expect that. We'll send that to you probably, maybe even as a follow-up to kind of give you, here's what happened at Senate Youth, here's who attended. For next year, who should we ask, okay? And then we'll have that mailing list, and that'll be helpful. Okay. Thank you. It's a great idea. All right. This is a kind of a shift. I mean, this is more part of the conversation for this civics test. And I just threw this up as a model from a group at Harvard that I just went and listened to in terms of re-envisioning civic education, a shift from just knowing stuff to actually actively engaging. Just so you're aware, these are kinds of some of the competencies that we can think about as we consider the menu of choices for civics test, okay? Okay, this is a link, again in Google Docs, to Utah higher ed social studies professors. I had Megan Osborne, who's this amazing teacher. She went and culled through all the websites of higher ed in Utah and put onto this spreadsheet professor is, what's their specialty, what's their current research, okay? So you can think about this as a resource for the conference, right? And this, I think, for Utah History Day, this would be a really useful resource for kids who are doing research on Joe Hill or whomever, mining in Utah or World War II. There's the link. So use it. I'm going to share it out with folks, but I just thought, I'm trying to bridge the gap between K-12 and higher ed. This is one initiative. Okay? Questions about that? I think it's going to be cool. We just have to use them. Like, we have amazing people coming in. The Tanner Humanities Center is bringing in, like, Maya Lynn. Who else? I mean, just all sorts of folks. And I just met with the people up at the University of Utah Tanner Humanities Center to talk with them about bridging the gap so that you all know and that teachers know when events like this are occurring, you can invite and let. So Better Days 2020, I just sent out an email, separate email, regarding professional learning opportunities with Better Days. Better Days is an amazing organization, I think, based in Utah, celebrating the centennial of the passage of the 19th Amendment and the 150th anniversary of women actually voting on Valentine's Day of 1870 in the council hall, which is now the little Office of Tourism up across from the Capitol, because it got moved up there. They're going to have a monument and celebrate on that day. But Naomi Watkins, who's awesome, is available to do professional development, and I have money to pay for your subs. Okay? So if you want her to come out and work with your teachers on great lessons about women's suffrage and the connection to civic life, you know, we'll let her know, and we'll work with you. I just sent that email out about the lesson plans and opportunities. It's available. Link it up. She's great.
So we already have her scheduled, and she'll do a half day or a full day. And we're also joining with ELA teachers to have her come.
Great. Thank you for doing that.
But half day
appreciate
or full day, she'll arrange what she does to what your needs are.
All right. We have Holocaust and genocide education opportunities pretty try. I did some stuff with Facing History and Ourselves over the summer in June before the civics conference. Wendy, you've got an event already with a waiting list.
Waiting list, yeah, it's on Monday, and but it is with Echoes and Reflections. This is our fourth year, I think, doing an Echoes training in the fall. But I was able to link in with ELA teachers this time, and they're very excited about it.
Which is where a lot of Holocaust education occurs. And I really appreciate, Desi, your kind of reminding us that a lot of these issues are larger than just social studies. So I have put aside also money for Holocaust education. So if you've got a desire to make something happen, then I will work with you and your district in terms of paying for subs, bringing in a speaker. We have a guest speaker roster of people that we're trying to get on the UN page. We just haven't gotten that done yet. I also put money aside for document-based questioning work. I feel like could be really useful. Primary source work. If you want to do something with that, let me know. And we can do it with multi-districts, and we can schedule it and happen at some point sometime in the fiscal year between now and the end of June. Okay, but I have about $10,000 for each of these that I was able to grab. So I want to spend it with your help.
Can I say one more thing about Echoes and Reflections? I don't know how familiar you are with the organization, but the material is really excellent, and the program is funded by the ADL and by Yad Vashem and Shoah Foundation. So they use a lot of oral histories that Steven Spielberg has gathered. And they have just started doing a lot of online education. So if you're remotely interested, get on their mailing list, because, I love bringing speakers out, but we can't do that with a lot of frequency, just because the speaker has a day job. And but I think their online stuff is pretty accessible and would be a great option just for sprinkling in to other things that you're doing.
Resources from the Holocaust Museum as well. I'm on their website, and they have a phenomenal amount of material, lectures, you name it, it's on there.
There's no end to
There's a great many resources out there.
It's just about doing it right, and obviously continuing to have to do it, because I just want to mention that I'm curious as to whether you are aware of or know of your district policy regarding things like what happened with the Nazi outfit. Are you aware? Do you know, like, is there some kind of, do you guys have a district policy that says don't wear?
And things like that, but, you know, and it's in our dress standards, at least at the, I'm just learning the elementary world a little bit.
Yeah.
And that happened at an elementary. You know, it would be definitely in our dress standards in most districts.
A lot more conservative than that. Serial killers. Halloween, if I were in the position of that teacher, it's like this, how do I handle that? I don't know how I would handle it. I probably would have handled it by saying, well, let's see what happens.
Which is what happened. It went viral, folks. I mean, it's because it's.
But,
Washington Post picked it up.
but I think that somebody else might have been equally offended. I mean, we have some pretty conservative people say, you let devil.
It's a great conversation to have. I'm just curious about whether, is there any leadership out on this? Is this a learning opportunity? Is this a conversation to have about, I mean, you know, I don't know.
We are having conversations.
Yeah.
It was in the ring.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, it's just, obviously, you can imagine some people are incredibly offended. Also get your point. But, you know, I mean, we still have the, please don't wear a tribal headdress and put war paint on. And we still have that occurring as well. Anyway, I was just kind of curious about whether you have, like, what's your policy, or what's the learning, or better yet, what are the learning opportunities for conversations with kids in classrooms about an event like this, and why certain people it's hard.
Why we don't wear blackface anymore? I don't know that we talk about those things in class.
Probably on one of our portrait of graduate points that we should.
Because it's not measured.
Respect. Acknowledge differences by looking for the good in everyone. Show due regard for feelings, rights, cultures, and traditions.
There you go.
There you go. Okay, well, it's fascinating, it's interesting, it's complicated, but it's a learning opportunity. So I hope that you're having conversations about it. You had a great response. Just like, yeah, pull the kid in, pull the armband off, give him a cane, and he's Charlie Chaplin. So there you go. You know. All right, Wendy. Sorry to make you wait until now. You want to talk about?
Can I use your computer?
Well,
You're gonna have to close some tabs.
I know. I can't. I have a dialogue box open.
You need to open them, but not close them.
So, so Wendy, if you don't know Wendy, you want to talk about who you are, what your role is?
Sure. So my main role is coordinating the National History Day program, but, and I'm with the Utah Division of State History, but we've also done our best to squeeze in some work on curriculum when we are able to do that, and kind of inspired, like really inspired by the new standards, the new social studies core. So we knew that was coming, and we wanted to be able to bring the resources, the primary sources that are housed at the Division of State History, make them more available and accessible for teachers. So here's what's really funny. We've been working on this for, 3 years? A long time. And we launched it a year ago in the fall, and I never thought I should present this at Robert's meeting.
Isn't that great? It's like, oops. Yeah, it's kind of like when you forget to register for the conference you're holding.
It is like that. I mean, we send emails out, and Robert sent emails out, but we all know that inboxes, don't allow people to open all of their mail. So this is the product, and this is where we have it so far. It does live at the Utah Division of State History under Inquire and K-12 resources. Oh, hey, Stasha.
Yeah.
In that envelope, I brought a flyer with the link. Do you want to just send those
Send
around?
out.
But what we did is we looked at our collection for where we have strength in the number of resources on a topic that would fit well with different standards in the social studies core. And we built lesson plans. We have 4 right now. We have 1 more we're working on that focuses on Carbon County and mining and diversity there, which is going to be great when it's done.
Because the languages spoken in Carbon County in like 1910 were like, they were like 50.
23.
That was like amazing. How many were there?
23 nationalities, if I remember right.
Is that amazing?
So
I liked 50. It was more fun.
I'll go with that.
Be historically accurate. Right? I know.
So I want to show you what we decided. We did a lot of thinking about how we wanted to present them, because I look at what happens on the Library of Congress website when you go there to look for primary sources, and it's completely overwhelming, and there's no context. Like, I looked at a lot of things that I thought I wouldn't even know what to do with this. And so that was really in the front of our minds as we built these. So you can see they all have, they are PDFs, and they are multiple pages. But we figured that you could download them and print whatever you wanted, or you could project right from the PDF in the classroom. And then we also have links to the actual sources, which have mostly been digitized. In the corner, we let you know which standards it will help you fulfill. And then we provide quite a bit of background on the topic and about the documents, because we've talked with Paul Reeve up at the U a number of times about, particularly with Utah Studies, how many teachers end up teaching that class that do not have a lot of background in Utah history. And so we wanted to plan for that. So if they need the background, we have it for them. And we also created a student reading page that boils down that background section, but it's given out to the kids. That was Jeff Noakes' idea. And then we just layer in the primary sources into the PDF. So each page will have a primary source. A lot of times we'll add some kind of directional discussion questions or things to consider. And then the sources represent just a really wide variety. So this one about Utah women during the war, we have de-icer equipment from Hill Air Force Base. We have good pictures from, ones are sewing jackets. We have pictures from the Manti Parachute Factory where women worked. And then we also found this really cool document. It's clear down here. Sorry, I know this
It makes me want to go there to see all this other cool stuff.
Yeah. So we have a pamphlet from the Utah Minute Women, which was a women's organization. It was, dispersed and kind of operated through religious structures, but not entirely. But they did all kinds of, ran salvage programs. So we didn't put the whole booklet in here, but we did think that just linking to how we recycle today would be interesting. So there's a campaign to save your used fats. And they have, I like this one, Fats for Victory.
Oh, we should make that a t-shirt.
The Deer and Elk Fat Project, totally relevant in rural Utah. There are instructions how to properly prepare a can to be recycled.
With that stiletto, right?
Exactly. Step on it. So anyway, this is just one example, but you can see part of the trick with finding good primary sources to use in the classroom is finding sources that kids can relate to and unpack a little bit. And so just the research work in looking through all the stuff that we have in our collections, 95% of it is not useful in a classroom, I would say. Have
Reams of census data.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Right. So a lot of that work has been done as we've just compiled things that we think would work well for teachers to use. And we also wanted to put enough variety in here that I have no expectation that a teacher will use every single thing in one of these compilations, but whether you're teaching 4th or 7th grade, you could probably find something that you would be able to use. So this resource is free. It lives online. We did put links to these, but they are so buried and invisible. I actually can't even find them now. And
Nice.
I did know where they were at one time,
Yeah,
but
wow,
they're
right.
just not there. So the flyer has the link to our website where you can find these. And then we also put the link on for the transcontinental lesson plans, because those railroad ones mostly live on UEN. We did build one. Oh, I should show you the one that we built. Because I think one of the coolest things is we had our GIS people work in our antiquities department. They map antiquity sites all over the state. They created railroad maps for this lesson. They're really cool. So we put together development maps, right? So starting with the Transcontinental, which was the first railroad in the state, and then how they built out across the state. So you can see, they're going to natural resource areas. They are totally built to be transporting natural resources up into the urban areas and out of the state on the Transcon. And you can see how they grow over time.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yep. So there you go. Transportation network, a
And they did
resource
an
network.
amazing story map on Transcontinental Railroad as well,
Yeah.
on the Transcontinental Railroad site.
And I would just encourage you, if you go to our website to look at our K-12 resources, we do have other things there, not just these. The story map is there, and several other things that, historic maps. Just a variety of things that have been put together that are relevant enough for K-12 that we've grouped them here.
This work, state history. Has anybody worked with Esri? Has anybody done, does anybody know, I don't know how to get licenses. Does anybody have contact with that to get, so kids can make story maps? I had a teacher who wanted to do that, but I don't know who the contact person is.
People at your districts to find out, and then Adam Dastrup might.
Yeah, I emailed Adam, so, okay.
But your digital education, digital.
Do you know?
I don't know. Through us,
Oh, you
I
don't?
think that's a combination of geography and CT maybe. We have somebody at the district professionally who does it, but I don't think.
Yeah, you can all get.
Yeah, I just don't know where that is. All right, thank you. Yeah, that was all I had.
It's 12:01.
Awesome, thank you guys, appreciate your work.